Hello again. It's me, the snarky juror. Hopefully, I've got this set up so it'll be a smooth transition. If not, we'll find out the hard way. From what I've sneak peeked into everything, we're going to start with Julie Nagel. Her cross will continue. Julie Nagel is the friend of Nicole and Brian Albert's son, Brian Albert Jr. Julie is one of his friends. And Julie claims she saw a black blob in the yard when they were leaving in the early morning hours between 1:30 and 2. But she didn't tell nobody. There's a lot of as in suspect crap going on. These kids, I don't know. I don't know. So let's go watch, see what else is going to be sus, because it's always something with these guys. Let me make this bigger. It's bigger. And I'll get it going. I haven't quite started yet.
You are unmuted.
That's always good to hear.
You are muted. You are unmuted.
Somebody's having fun with the button.
All rise to the jury.
Okay, jury's coming in. I show a lot of this stuff because to give you the feel of what it would be like if you were a juror. But then we have the advantage of seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff, especially if I peek at other channels. They give me other information. There is a channel called Aussie Insider,
Hear ye,
AUSSIE.
hear ye, hear ye. All persons having anything to do before the Honorable First Justice Beverly Cannoni, now sitting in the Dedham Superior Court within and for the County of Norfolk. Draw near, give your attendance, you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth and this good court. Thank you. You may be seated. Morning.
Morning.
That was one in or two.
22-117, the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed.
All right. Good morning again, counsel. Good morning, Ms. Reed. Good morning, jurors. We appreciate you being ready and willing to go forward. We did spend a little time this morning with the lawyers moving things forward, so our time was well spent. We appreciate your patience. I have to ask you those 3 questions. Were you all able to follow the instructions and refrain from discussing this case with anyone? Yes. Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Did you also follow the instruction and refrain from doing any independent research or investigation into this case? Yes. Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Did anyone happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case since we left yesterday? No. Everyone said no or sure. All right, thank you. May we have Ms. Nagel, please?
I'd be ejected right now. Anyway, this Aussie Insider is a cool channel. He takes snippets of other people doing trial coverage, and it's amusing. He did it during I think they did it during the Depp trial. It was really cute how it was done. It's worth a look.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor.
Morning, Ms. Nagel.
Good morning.
Just a few questions for you. In regard to the interview or the conversation that you had with Trooper Proctor, were there any other troopers present during the course of that conversation?
Yes.
Do you recall who that trooper was?
I can't recall his name, no.
We'll start with a B.
If I could turn your attention back to January 29th in the early morning when you were leaving the house on 3rd. You indicated that you saw a dark object in an area of the front lawn, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you had been to the house at 34 Fairview on several different occasions prior to this day, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever been over in that area of that front lawn? Was that an area that was used, that you observed by the homeowners or anyone there?
Not really. No.
And what, if anything, do you recall about the lighting in that particular area of the yard?
I mean, it was dark out, but with the snow, it was kind of, you could see a little bit of a glare.
Do you recall any sort of streetlights or anything like that in that area?
I can't recall, no.
Now, you see this object, which you described as approximately 5 to 6 feet long, is that right?
Yes, correct.
And in the area of the flagpole, is that correct?
Yes.
And at the time that you saw it, were you expecting or anticipating something over in that area of the yard?
No.
And when you were driving past it, is that the first time that you saw it?
Yes.
Now, if you had realized or had recognized that dark object,
That's a hypothetical.
long in that area near the flagpole, had you realized that was a body, what would you have done?
I'll allow it.
I would have,
Well,
called 911 if I thought it was an actual body, and told everybody else in the car as well.
And your testimony again was that you put sort of 2 and 2 together the following day, correct?
Yes.
and did you go to the police then? Did you call them then?
Okay.
Yo,
So if you realized it was a body, you would have called 911, correct?
Yes.
And that's because you would have realized that was very important information, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
If you realized it was a body, you would have realized that was very important information, correct?
Yes.
And your testimony today is that you realized it was a body the very next day, correct?
The next day after I had a conversation, yes.
You didn't call 911 at that point, correct?
I did not know.
You called the police business line.
I did not know.
Did you speak to any police?
No.
Right. And you would agree with me, Ms. Nagel, that object became 5 to 6 feet long yesterday for the first time.
Objection.
I'm not necessarily.
Ask the question differently, Ms. Tianetti.
The first time you've mentioned to anybody that that object was 5 to 6 feet long was yesterday to this jury 2.5 years after you supposedly saw it, correct?
Yes.
Nothing further.
yeah, really.
All right, Ms. Nagel, you are all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You just threw her away. Nothing really. And it's true.
Next witness, please, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth to call Ms. Teri Kun to the stand.
While she's coming in, can I see counsel just about this witness for a second, please? Mr.
Number 31. Teri Kun will be number 32. Oops. Let's see if I spell it right. With a Y or an I? With a K or a C? Is that one of the girls? No, that was Judy, Kent, Alba, and Fabiano. So I don't know who this is. I don't remember hearing the name before.
Next witness testifies. I just want to tell you that sometimes we call witnesses out of order. Sometimes witnesses have to be called in a certain time frame because of their schedules or some other instance. And the lawyers were kind enough to work this out among themselves. So we appreciate it. All right.
So would this be, what is this? Oh, she's a forensic scientist. T-E-R-I. K-U-N.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
Forensic
Morning, ma'am.
Morning.
Would
Science.
you please state your name and spell your last name?
It's Teri Kun. It's Terikun.
And
She's done this
what do you do for work?
I work for UC Davis at the Veterinary Genetics Lab in the Forensics Unit.
And what is your job title there?
My job title is Forensic Scientist, DNA Technical Lead. My UC classification is SRA4.
And that UC classification as far as SRA4, what does that mean?
Oh, Staff Research Associate.
And how long have you worked there?
Almost 25 years now.
And if I could, I'd like to talk a little bit about your educational background, starting with undergraduate. Where did you go and what, if any, degree did you receive?
So I went to Sacramento State, or California State University, Sacramento. I received a minor in chemistry and a biological science degree in molecular biology.
And following receiving those degrees, where did you go educationally?
I went to UC Davis and I received a Master of Science degree in Forensic Science DNA.
And was that prior to you joining the lab there, or what, if any, relationship to that?
I actually started my job at the lab after my undergraduate degree in 1999, and I started my postgraduate degree, I believe, in 2009, and finished in 2011. So I was actually already working at the lab at that time.
Now, with regard to the forensic program,
You know, she's not just Joe Schmo.
What role did you have in sort of the creation of that lab?
I was actually one of the people who helped establish our forensics program in our lab, and I currently help with all the training, and any future forensic scientists that we employ, I do their training as well.
Now, have you been invited to speak at any sort of conferences or things of that nature in regard to your work in forensic science?
Yes, I've spoken at the California Association of Criminalists, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the Northwestern Forensic Sciences, and rural livestock in the Western states.
Have you been published in this particular area?
Yes, I've published 7 times, most of them in Forensic Science International Genetics.
Vet.
And
Vet
when it
info,
comes to those
vet
publications, are you familiar with the process called peer review?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what that process entails and how that implicates things that are published?
So anytime we go to publish, we put out an article to whatever publication we would like to, and it goes through a peer review process, which that article is sent out to peers in our industry, and they review our work to see that it is solid. And if they approve it, then the article does get published.
Now, over the course of your years with the lab at UC Davis, how many forensic samples of DNA have you tested?
Oh, in the thousands.
Now, if you could describe to the jury the type of work that your lab performs.
So we have 2 sides of our lab. We have a service side, which provides diagnostic testing, parent verification testing, and then we have our forensic side. We do animal parent verification as well. We also do match comparison, which we compare samples to see if they're coming from the same source, and we do species identification.
Now, what kind of cases do you typically see, like in the lab?
We can do anything from homicides to helping people see if remains are their lost pet to provide closure for them.
And what are the sort of different types of agencies that you've done work for over the years of your work with the lab?
We've worked for police agencies, humane agencies, animal control agencies, and even private individuals, anybody who believes they can use our services.
And the lab that you work for at UC Davis, is that lab accredited?
Yes, it is. It's accredited. Oh, sorry.
Answer my next question. As far as the lab accreditation, can you explain to the jury sort of what that process is and what's entailed in it?
How
So
detailed?
our lab is accredited by a group called ANAB, and that's the American National Standards Institute National Accreditation. They accredit labs to ensure that the policies and the procedures that we're following, they set a standard for those, and they come and check our standards. Are we meeting those standards? And it's also the same standards that most crime labs are associated with.
Now, in reference to that, labs that do DNA testing specifically and only in regard to humans, the accreditation that your lab has versus the accreditation that those types of labs have, what any difference is there?
There's no difference. The accreditation is the same.
Now, if you could explain explain to the jury what exactly is DNA?
So DNA is the blueprint of your life. It's what makes your eye color what it is. It's makes your hair color, how tall you're going to be, and you get one half of that from your mom and one half from your dad.
And where is DNA found?
So DNA is found in most cells. It's in the nucleus of the cell. You get one copy of DNA per cell. There's also another kind of DNA called mitochondrial DNA. And in a cell, that is found in the plasma of a cell, and there'll be thousands of copies of mitochondrial.
And if you could explain sort of the difference between mitochondrial DNA versus what would you classify the other type of DNA?
So nuclear DNA is, again, that individual type of DNA. It's the DNA where we could say that that's you or that's a particular animal, and it would be a statistic of 1 in 3,000 or 1 in 350 million type thing. Mitochondrial DNA actually runs along the maternal line. So if you're a mom and you have a couple kids and a grandma there, they would all share the same maternal type.
And how is DNA used in forensic science?
For what we do in forensic science for animal DNA, we use it for parent verification. We use it for determining if two samples come from the same source, and we use it for species identification.
And is DNA testing just generally accepted in the scientific community?
Yes, it is.
And can you explain for the jury sort of DNA typing, that process? How does that work? What is it sort of specifically that you do?
So the main steps are when we get a sample, we need to lyse open those cells. That DNA is in the center of the cell, those mitochondria are there, but they're protected by a cell wall. So our first step is to lyse that cell wall and release the DNA. Once that is done, we want to see how much DNA that we have. And so we have something called qPCR, or quantitative PCR, that allows us to tell how much of that nuclear DNA is in a sample. From there, we would go to a DNA typing. As you can imagine, if you only have one copy of DNA in a cell, it would take a lot of cells to be able to visualize that DNA. So we have to go through a process of making multiple copies. We use something called pointers. It tells us what parts of the DNA that we're looking for. That can vary from species to species or from test to test of what we're trying to do. And we amplify that in a process called PCR. And that can be you could think of it like a photocopier. Every time it goes through a cycle, it makes a copy. So if we start off with one copy, we get 2. From 2, we get 4. 4, we get 8. And by the end of this cycling, we have millions of copies that actually allow us to be able to visualize that DNA. And then the last step is actually visualizing it. The DNA actually has to run through a matrix. It's kind of like a sponge with all the little holes. Small pieces of DNA go out first, and we can see those first, and the larger pieces of DNA come out last. So it's allowing us to both see the DNA, and it separates it by size.
And how do you get type?
Did you do the forensic testing with regard to the samples that were submitted to your lab in this case?
Yes, I did.
And as far as those steps that you just described, are those the steps that you followed in regard to this?
Yes, they were.
And do you have sort of standard procedures for what you do in the lab?
Yes, we have standard procedures or SOPs that we follow for all of our work that we do.
Standard operating
In this
procedure.
case, you follow those same sort of standard procedures and protocols?
Yes, I did.
Now, what, if any, efforts are taken in your lab to preserve the evidence or prevent contamination?
So what we do to preserve evidence, prevent contamination, one of the things we use is a bleach product. So anytime we're using a surface, be it for sample collection, doing PCR, doing the extraction, we're wiping down everything with this bleach product, doing our work, and then wiping it down again. Samples are stored according to what we have. So dry evidence is stored in a locked cabinet. Wet evidence, such as blood, is stored in a fridge. Tissue is stored in a locked freezer. The fridge is also locked as well. So they're also kept in their original packaging, and they're sealed, and they're only unsealed and used when they're being actually manipulated for sample collection.
Like in an open carport?
What samples did you receive in this case?
In this case, we received 2 swabs.
And Dr. Mayhow, just a moment.
Yes.
He doesn't have the right questions written down on his tablet.
You're close.
Sir, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
I think Miss Little is going to do the cross. Nope, I'm wrong. I can't remember his name. And I know it. Jackson. Ah. Alan Jackson. Not the singer. Yeah. Monongahela Jackson.
Okay.
And just in general terms, you recognize what's depicted in those 7 photographs?
Yes, this is the evidence that we received.
And those photographs that you would have taken as you were unpackaging the samples in this case?
Yes, and they contain a sticker on there that has our case number, the date we received it, and my initials.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
What if they're contaminated before you get it?
Thank
Which
you.
they were. They're sus.
Thank you.
Pictures of a bag with red tape. I'd hate to have her job. That's supposed to be 2 people's job. One a court recorder and one a clerk of courts who keeps track of the files.
I said thank you. Your Honor, may I return these to the witness, and with the court's permission, may I publish them to the jury?
Yes.
Ms. Kuhn, now placing before you, what I placed before you, now been marked as Exhibit 7480. With regard to the first exhibit that you have before you, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as Exhibit 74?
I heard it.
Yes, it is.
Can you describe to the jury what we're looking at in this particular photograph?
So this is the evidence that we received. The little sticker on the bottom is the one that we applied at our lab. It includes the case number, the date, and my initials. And we do this to ensure that we can show that this is how the evidence arrived. It arrived in a sealed and packaged manner.
And the following exhibit number 75, that's essentially another photograph of the same packaging, is that correct?
So it's the same packaging, but it's the back of the packaging, because in this instance, that actually shows where the evidence was sealed as well and the date as well.
And who, if anyone, or what entity did you receive this package from?
Can I look at my notes? I don't recall the exact entity.
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
When the state, it showed it on the other side.
Thanks. So the client in this case was the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, Adam Lilly.
And so, but as far as these samples from whom you received, was that the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
They were the people I was in contact with about sending them. We consider the client is the one who submitted the sample on our submission form.
But the person who physically sent the sample from one lab to the other was the MSPCL, is that correct?
Let me look at their form here. There was. sorry, there was a form that came with it as well. Let me find that. So yes, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of State Police Forensic Services Division Crime Lab was the one who submitted the samples to our lab.
And are you familiar with it? Did you have any conversations with a forensic scientist at the State Police Lab in Massachusetts named Maureen Hartnett?
Yes, I did.
Is that someone that you had worked with on prior cases in the past?
Yes, I have.
Now, if I could direct your attention to the next exhibit before you, number 6. And again, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you?
Yes.
And if you could just describe to the jury what we're looking at.
So that brown packaging you saw before, this was actually what was inside of that brown packaging.
And the next exhibit.
And this is that same item that was inside, but the back side of the packaging.
There's the swab.
And that shows the 2 swabs that were contained inside that packaging. And that was the first swab that we selected for testing.
What's contained in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you received and sort of how you delineated those items as far as labeling them by your case number?
Yes, it was.
And for the case number, as far as the FCD and the number, sort of how was that determined, or what does that mean?
So FC always refers to forensic case. In this case, D is for dog because they were asking for dog DNA testing. If it was C, it would be for cattle. F would be for feline, but the FC is always the beginning part. The third letter always kind of denotes what species we're looking for.
Now, pursuant to receiving those particular items, are you also given any sort of identifier as far as from the outside lab or the external vendor, as far as what label they have for the sample, or where the sample came from, is from the outside lab?
We did receive a piece of paper that with the submission saying it was taken from a shirt.
And do you recall specifically what the item number was or where it was swabbed on that shirt?
No, do you remember that?
I do not. It would be on that piece of paper, I believe.
Would that also be delineated somewhere within your report and your findings?
The case number would be in our findings.
And I'm sorry, not specifically in your findings, but within this context of your report with that.
In the report, the case number that they gave us is listed in the report.
Your Honor, do you have your report with you, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that the witness be allowed to refer to a report to that.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Ask the question already.
And I'm sorry, what is that?
Oh, did you want the case number there?
The case number and the item number.
So the case number was listed as MSCLP number 22-02184, item 7-18.16.
Now, Ms. Kuhn, with reference to these samples, did the samples arrive as you expected as far as the packaging and things of that nature?
Yes, everything was arrived sealed, and as you saw, that was documented in our with our photos, and it's also documented in my notes.
Did you test all of the samples that were submitted now?
Yes, we did.
And what is it that you were asked to test?
We were asked to determine species via canine qPCR. qPCR is that quantitative PCR that tells us how much DNA is in a sample, and it is specific for canine, because the next goal they asked is if we could develop a DNA profile to possibly use for a comparison with a reference sample to be submitted later. If we weren't able to see anything with canine DNA there, we were asked to do our species tests called Meat ID.
Now, first, with reference to the sort of nuclear DNA testing that you did, what were the results of that initial testing?
For the canine qPCR testing, we did not see any canine DNA.
And when you say, just if you could explain to the jury or expound upon that as far as what are you looking at and what are you seeing or not seeing that leads you to that?
So the canine DNA we're looking for in that is that nuclear DNA, that DNA that's used for an individual, because the idea was if we see canine DNA in the quantitative qPCR, then we know we have canine DNA on that swab, and we can try and use that to develop the DNA profile for a later comparison.
Who took the swabs?
Now,
When?
per the questions that you were asked or what you were asked to test, upon not finding any canine DNA from the PCR test or the qPCR test, what, if any, steps have you taken that further testing?
The next test we performed was our meat ID test. It's a general species test. It tests for 12 species altogether. They would include dog, cat, bison, cattle, horse, sheep, goat, mouse, rat, pig, and rabbit. I'm pretty sure I got them all, but I can't guarantee.
Now, and I'm sorry to jump around here a little bit, but when going back to sort of the qPCR testing, can you explain to the jury sort of what is it, what type of instruments are you using and what exactly goes into that process? So
we're taking the sample and we're using primers that concentrate, that point to a small piece of DNA for canine. And it's supposed to amplify it. And every time it's amplifying, it's actually releasing a color, fluorescent color that it's measuring. So if there's canine DNA, this fluorescent color keeps popping up, and it gives it a measurement in which it will tell us how much of the canine DNA we have. But in this case, the test did not see any fluorescence for canine DNA. So it was a negative result.
And then as far as when you say canine DNA, is that dogs specifically, or what, if anything, else would be included within canine?
Well,
In this qPCR test, other canines will work, or canids will work, like wolves, coyotes, and we are now doing some further testing on foxes, but we have not concluded those tests.
Now, as far as the meat ID test that you're talking about, that sort of second, can you explain again to the jury sort of what is involved in that and what are you doing?
So the meat ID test actually targets the mitochondrial DNA, which makes it a little bit better. There's, like I said, there's 1,000 mitochondrial in a cell versus that one nuclear DNA. So it's a lot more there. It's also a circular piece of DNA, so it's a little bit more hardy. It sticks around. And we have regions of the mitochondria that are specific to each of those species that I listed. And if we have, let me see what's here. We have pointers that actually will give us two different peaks. If we get two peaks that are both for pig, we have a pig result. If we get them two peaks for dog, we have a dog result, or the same can go for any of the species that we have. If we only get one peak, then we don't quantify that as being a positive result for that species.
And so you would need more than one peak in order to make that sort of opinion or qualification as far as species goes?
Right. We always have to have the two peaks for the species that we're getting results
is there
for.
a one peak for a dog?
And so with regard to the meat ID testing that you did with these swabs, these two swabs, what, if any, results did you receive, or what, if anything, did you observe upon completion of the testing?
So for both the swabs, we did see pig. And we also actually I did a little bit of a test where we only concentrated on the dog portion of the meat ID. You can think of it as when we have all 12 species there, there's a lot of competition going on. By just concentrating on the dog meat ID, it eliminates all the competition. It gives us a better chance of getting a result if there is canine DNA there, and that result was negative. So the only result we got for both those swabs was for the pig.
And they have a
And
pet
so,
pig,
again,
you
just
know.
to be clear, as far as the canine was concerned, there was not even one peak from what you.
There was absolutely no canine DNA.
Now, as far as the pig is concerned, what, if anything, could that be from?
I don't know where that could come from. That would be speculation on my part. It's a sensitive test, I can tell you.
So you swabbed a pig.
Yeah, it would
and not
depend on where that
swab
shirt had been and what the person had been doing with it.
My question, I guess, is if it, as far as the source, could that be from beyond just an animal? Could it be from some other source such as food or something like that?
Yes, it could be from food. We have tested the meat ID test. In fact, that's what it was developed for, was for testing food products. And so we've seen it come from cooked pork, cooked bacon, in terms of the pig. I do remember those were tested specifically.
I'll be interested to see what the defense comes up with forensic.
May I have just one moment, please?
Sure.
So, Ms. Kuhn, just lastly, just to be crystal clear, from your testing in regard to both the qPCR and the meat ID testing, there was absolutely no canine DNA that you observed on the 2 samples that were submitted to you from the State Police Lab, Massachusetts.
That's correct. We observed no canine DNA.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Kuhn.
Hi.
Just to finish that thought, and to start off, there was no canine DNA detected in your testing, correct?
Correct.
So when you say there was no canine DNA, that's a little bit of an overstatement, correct?
There was no canine DNA in the swabs that we tested.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. So the Massachusetts State Police did not send you any actual items of clothing or cuttings or source material, did they?
No, they did not.
As a matter of fact, the only thing to be tested were the swabs that you received, those 2 swabs that we saw very nicely photographed.
Yes.
You'd agree that your analysis of those swabs is only as good as the starting material with which you have to work, correct?
That would be correct. I only have the swabs to test. That's the only thing I can talk about.
So the integrity of any DNA testing has to start foundationally with the proper recovery techniques for what's being tested, what goes on the swab.
I have no idea how the agency collected the swabs.
So you're left,
Bingo.
I guess the next question would be, you're left to assume that proper techniques were used to swab the source material.
Yes.
And for a forensic scientist, that assumption may not always be valid.
Well, in cases cases can vary for us. Sometimes we get the actual source material. Sometimes we do get the swabs. It's dependent upon the agency sending it in. It depends on their policies and procedures, which I cannot dictate.
Right. So because if the swab is not collected properly, or the source material is not swabbed properly, then you're left with sort of a garbage in, garbage out analysis, right?
But I wasn't there to see the swabs being collected, so I have no idea. I couldn't comment on that.
So that answers my next question. You were not present when the swabs were taken, correct?
No,
You couldn't oversee the collection of those swabs.
no,
You didn't take the swabs yourself.
no,
And you never did receive any of the source material from which those swabs were taken.
no, only the 2 swabs.
You do understand very clearly from your testimony and the UC Davis,
Yep.
University of California Davis
Excuse me.
lab, and the impressive work that y'all do, you do understand proper protocols for evidence collection, correct?
Right, when we do collection at our lab.
For one thing, you keep proper logs, correct?
Correct.
As a matter of fact, in your report, there's a log, a couple of pages of logs that literally detail down to the minute when somebody touched those swabs, correct?
Correct.
That's because it's important to maintain those types of logs to avoid contamination on the one hand, right?
I don't know if keeping the logs maintained prevents contamination.
That's a fair correction. The logs would give you an idea of who touched something when, and if there was some contamination, you might be able to work backward to figure out how that contamination occurred.
Correct.
That's why the logs are in place, correct?
It's to be able to see step by step where everything was going.
It maintains a very, very specific chain of custody.
Correct.
Chain
So
of-
everybody that touches those swabs or that item it's going into an evidence locker or coming out of an evidence locker or being tested, that's highly, highly regulated, and it's marked on a log.
It's documented in my case notes, and it's documented on our internal chain of custody.
So there's literally multiple documents that that memorialize the movement of that evidence, right?
As it goes through our lab, yes.
Right, and your lab, that those criteria include the time that something was touched,
Yes.
the place where it was touched,
We don't document the place.
meaning it was taken out of this particular locker and put on this
Oh,
particular-
yes.
The person that manipulated those items or that item?
Yes.
Okay. You were asked about the processes that your lab undertakes to avoid or reduce contamination.
Correct.
You were asked that by Mr. Lally on direct examination. You recall that?
Yes.
You went through what your lab and the accreditation process, the protocols that you employ to make sure that contamination is reduced, hopefully to a minimum.
Yes.
But you don't know what any other lab might employ in terms of their reduction of contamination processes.
No, I don't know this.
And you specifically don't know what the Massachusetts Crime Lab did or didn't do with this subject material before you got the swabs.
Correct.
You
Notice
don't know
no
if they took any
objections.
steps, as a matter of fact, to reduce contamination of the source material before the swabs were taken.
I don't know anything about how they took those swabs.
You would agree that, for instance, if the source material had been tossed on the bottom of an ambulance floor, that could encourage contamination of that source material.
Objection.
Can you answer that question?
I don't know because we haven't tested that sort of thing.
Well,
It's an interesting question. I do agree, but we have not done any validation, which would be able to prove that sort of thing.
well, I guess what I'm asking is if the item is supposed to be not contaminated, right? It's supposed to be relatively pristine, and it drops on the floor, that might encourage contamination of that particular item that's supposed to be left as pristine as possible, correct?
Again, I don't know the history of the item, so I couldn't speak to it.
All right, so I think you have to move on.
If in fact the source material was not packaged properly, could that encourage contamination?
But I didn't see how the items were packaged.
I'm not asking that, Ms. Gill. I'm asking you hypothetically, if an item, the source item that's going to be tested, is not packaged and handled properly, that could encourage contamination, correct?
I have not seen that. What I have seen when something's been packaged incorrectly is I've seen the induction of mold growth, which has prevented bacteria, which causes bacteria, which eats away at DNA. So it doesn't give me contamination, but it does mean that I don't see DNA.
There might be, if something is handled inappropriately, for instance, if something is handled sloppily before it's tested, it might reduce the validity of the ultimate test that's undertaken, correct?
Objection.
I'm going to sustain that.
Oh, God.
There are certain proper swabbing techniques involved in the preparation of a swab, correct?
Yes,
That includes wearing gloves, using clean tools, correct?
correct,
It includes proper documentation of the swabbing.
correct.
The documentation might include the location or the description of exactly where the item was swabbed. Is that right?
Correct.
That would be helpful in your analysis to know exactly where something was swabbed.
No,
What about any visible markings to show where swabbing was taken? Is that normally done?
it varies from lab to lab what we get. I unfortunately can't dictate what every other lab does. They all have their own policies and procedures, and we work with labs across the United States and the world.
If you were swabbing something in your lab, which is an accredited lab, would you encourage marking exactly where something was swabbed so it could later be documented?
When I swab things in my lab, I actually circle on the item. There's a note with the case number, my initials, the date, and also a ruler present in the photo.
So if we have to go back in your circumstance that you just described, if we have to go back and try to replicate exactly where that swab was taken, you can do that?
Yes,
Okay. And you think that's obviously an important protocol?
that's the protocol in our lab.
So the swabs that are used are sterile swabs, obviously.
Yes,
In fact, isn't it true that crime labs discourage, for purposes of DNA swabbing, discourage the use of swabs with wooden sticks because they can encourage contamination as opposed to plastic sticks?
I have not heard that.
The swab is supposed to be moistened, right?
I do suggest that people moisten with water in order to make a better transfer.
And that needs to be distilled water, sterile water. Correct?
Sterile water.
And you swab over an area of interest, and then generally you would photograph the area that's being swabbed, correct?
I do.
You would want to air dry that swab completely
Yes.
before you package it. Is that right?
When I do my collection, I don't need to air dry my swabs because their next step is actually the extraction process. So I'm not doing collection and then pausing. I'm doing collection and starting my extraction.
When you, as a matter of fact, when you're collecting biomaterial, tissue samples, for instance, blood, other biomaterials, you would not want to package those in plastic because that would encourage some sort of mold growth.
Mold and bacteria, yes.
So it's discouraged to put any blood, for instance, in plastic containers.
Correct.
You certainly wouldn't put blood material that you're working with in non-sterile containers, would you?
Objection.
Sustained.
Would you put biological material in non-sterile containers?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
We don't have, everything that we use is sterile. All of our tubes that we would use, or once we do a collection, we put it in a tube for the extraction process. Those tubes are autoclaved and they don't have contamination. They are sterile.
You wouldn't use a solo cup.
I'm sorry, what?
Objection, Your Honor.
Solo cup.
The objection sustained.
You would maintain a strict chain of custody over that item to ensure the integrity and the admissibility of that DNA evidence?
I did, yes.
And I think we've covered this. You may have answered this already, that your personal protocol is that you actually photograph where everything is being swabbed from, correct?
Correct.
If there was DNA present on a source item, and it wasn't sampled properly or swabbed properly in the right spot, then that DNA would likely not be detected, correct?
I don't know why, I don't know the circumstances or why you would swab things, in a specific spot. I know in my lab how we do things.
What I'm asking is, if you have a source material and there's DNA over here and it's swabbed over here, you wouldn't expect this swab to detect that DNA.
That's correct.
Objection, Your Honor. Move to
I'll
strike.
let it stand. I'll let him have it.
What information were you provided about these two particular samples?
I wasn't really provided any information. I had to work with the person from the crime lab asking about what they wanted to test and try and narrow down the testing in terms of species, simply because it helps us make sure that we're directing the testing in the correct way for the answer that they're, or for the question that they're answering. So knowing the species in this case was important. It also made it so that we made sure that the testing was affordable as possible.
Understood. Would it be important for you to understand the condition of the material that was being swabbed as you engage your analysis?
I'm not.
Condition meaning, was it clean? Was it dirty? Did it have blood on it? Did it not have blood on it? Things of that nature.
No, since we don't get to choose how evidence is given to us, nice and clean with nice and clean DNA would be perfect, but that's not our perfect world we get samples from. So
Hardly ever happens, does it?
no, it hardly ever happens.
It would be important, however, to know whether or not there were obvious inhibitors on the source item when it was swabbed.
Knowing that there's dirt would be helpful, or possibly blood, because those can inhibit, but not necessarily. We don't necessarily have to know that ahead of time.
Were you told in this instance that the swabs were taken from a garment that had blood on it?
No.
Is blood an inhibitor?
It can be, yes.
Is garment dye an inhibitor?
Yes.
Were you told that there was blood on a dyed garment when you received the swabs?
No.
Your report indicates that the swabs that you did test, these two swabs, quote, did not indicate the presence of canine nuclear DNA, but did indicate the presence of inhibitors, end quote, correct?
That was in our qPCR.
Right. You explained that, quote, this result is obtained when either, number one, the canine nuclear DNA is degraded, is that right?
Correct.
Number two, it's, quote, obscured by inhibition, end quote.
Quote.
Or number three, there is no canine nuclear DNA present, correct?
Correct.
So in your report, you indicated that there are 3 reasons that you list for the possibility of not finding or not detecting the canine nuclear DNA in that sample.
Correct.
All right. 2 of those 3 reasons allow for the idea that the DNA is actually present, but it's either obscured by inhibitors or it's so degraded that it can't be detected.
The nuclear DNA.
Right. But it still could exist.
It could, yes.
It's just not, you can't see it if it's obscured, and you can't see it if it's degraded.
Correct.
Explain how an inhibitor works in your testing.
Excuse me. An inhibitor just actually stops the PCR process from happening. And so therefore you would see no results.
So did you find inhibitors in this sample?
In the nuclear DNA testing, yes.
And was that the qualitative polymerase chain reaction test, qPCR test?
Yes.
And in fact, an inhibitor is pretty much any chemical that's literally going to inhibit the enzyme from helping make the copies.
Correct.
Certain dyes inhibit.
Yes.
And certainly blood inhibits.
Heme from blood, yes.
And because of that, at least in that sample, the nuclear DNA sample, you're not saying that there was no canine DNA there. You're saying that the testing did not detect it.
In the qPCR nuclear test, correct.
And you've heard, obviously, there's a famous quote in science, that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right?
Correct.
Can you describe to the jurors what that phrase means?
Objection.
Sustain.
It means just because you don't find something means it's not there.
Objection.
Sustain.
You were able to detect the presence of pig DNA, right?
Correct.
And I think you said on direct examination that that could come from a number of sources, including food sources, right?
Correct.
Could come from dog treats.
Pardon me? Yes.
Could come from dog treats. Matter of fact, there are dog treats that are pig ears, literally.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Come on.
I believe so.
Or it could be that the shirt that was the source material was contaminated and not properly preserved.
I can't say where that DNA came from.
You're not aware of any feral pig populations in Massachusetts, are you?
I'm not.
Dog saliva would obviously be a good and a rich source of DNA, correct? Do you agree?
It depends on the context. We have cases where, I can refer to 2 cases that we did recently where there were small bites and we were able to get nuclear DNA from those sources.
Because there's probably saliva.
Yes.
Right. So saliva contains active, living, growing cells that slough off in the salivating process, right?
Correct.
That's why oftentimes for 23andMe or other companies, they want you to swab the inside of your cheek.
Right.
DNA, right?
Yes.
So that's a relatively rich source of DNA.
It depends on the amount of contact in the attack.
However, dog claws, the claws, would not be a good source of DNA, would they?
No.
And the reason for that is because the claws are like human fingernails. They're made of keratin.
Correct.
Keratin is dead, hardened cells.
Correct.
And not a good source for DNA.
Not in terms of scratching. We can do something where we pulverize them and we can get DNA from them then.
But you have to have the claw.
Generally, yes, we have to have the claw material.
I spoke over you a little bit, but I want to make sure we're clear about that. You're talking about you can possibly get DNA in a mitochondrial test if you have the claw and pulverize the claw.
Correct.
Possible to find some DNA. But in terms of touch DNA,
We
very
don't,
difficult to find it from a claw.
I really can't speak about touch DNA because it's not something we've tested or validated in our lab.
So you didn't have any claws that you tested here.
No,
As a matter of fact, you were just testing swabs from a shirt.
correct.
And you've already agreed that keratin is not a good DNA source because it's dead cells. Not
Correct.
live. Would you agree that one of the reasons that it's difficult to detect canine DNA, it was difficult to detect canine DNA in this case, is because it was potentially degraded, right?
Objection.
Ask the question differently.
Sure. In your report, you indicated that there were two obvious possibilities of not detecting the DNA. One was obscuring because of inhibitors, and one was degradation. The DNA would be too degraded.
Again, that was for the nuclear canine DNA.
Understand. So to be clear, in your conclusion, you're not testifying today that there was no dog DNA on that source shirt that was swabbed. You're saying that the two swabs that you got did not detect the DNA, correct?
In our meat ID test, we also have a test for an inhibitor. It's also called an IPC. It's the same initial internal positive control. And that's what did not work in the nuclear testing. It did work, and it worked very well in the test on the meat ID. So there wasn't any inhibition that we were seeing on the meat ID test.
But that's the ID test that you found. Okay.
Right, but it also was testing for dog at the same time.
But when you tested for dog for nuclear DNA, that test was either inhibited or so degraded that you couldn't tell.
For the nuclear test, yes.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Lally.
Ms. Kuhn, on that last point, it was, when pertains to the nuclear DNA testing, was either inhibited, degraded, or it wasn't there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as samples in your line of work, are you typically going like outside of the lab or going out to like a scene or anything like and collecting samples in that regard?
No, everything is sent to us.
So when you're collecting from a sample, it's done in the lab setting, is that correct?
And if we get the item, we're collecting it. But we have times in this case where the samples are sampled at the other crime lab, and then we just get those samples. So it happens both ways.
Now, if you recall, what, if any, conversation did you have with Ms. Hartnett or anybody from the Massachusetts State Lab in regard to the swabbing or the collection process?
Objection.
I'm going to allow it.
I gave her our basic swabbing practice. Even though they are a crime lab, I would assume that they would know what they were doing, which would be to swab with a sterile swab, using sterile water, allowing the swab to dry completely, and then packaging in paper and storing at room temperature before sending it to us.
And when you received it, and those 7 photographs before you, was the packaging that you received, was that appropriate? Was that what you expected?
Yes, it was what I expected.
Because they swabbed a pig and not the shirt.
Now, you described on direct, as far as the mitochondrial DNA testing and the meat ID as being hardier DNA, is that correct?
So yes, the mitochondrial DNA is a hardier DNA. There's a lot more of it when we're testing for nuclear DNA. Like I explained before, there's only one copy of DNA in a cell, which is for the mitochondrial in one cell. There's thousands. So you can have a lot more there. It makes for a better test, at least in terms of species. It's just a more sensitive test.
And there were no inhibitors or anything like that in the mitochondrial, the meat ID testing that you did?
No, the IPC worked very well.
Thank you. May I approach just to retrieve these?
Yes. Did you have anything further, Mr. Jackson?
Very briefly.
Okay.
You indicated that you gave Ms. Maureen Hartnett certain protocols to follow in terms of her swabbing and recovery. Is that right?
Yes.
Are you aware that Ms. Hartnett had also failed certain of her proficiency exams?
Objection, Your Honor.
a couple months earlier?
I am going to strike that, and the objection sustained.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
All right, you are all set. Thank you very much. All right. Could I see counsel just briefly, please?
Mr. Hartman, you're going to get reprimanded for making such a statement. You know, that dog was a German Shepherd mix. Maybe the other part of the mix was pig. It's possible. This really didn't clarify anything, really.
All right, Mr. Lally, your next witness.
Didn't he lose the
Mr.
shirt?
Call Mr. Ryan Nagel to the stand.
Okay.
Oh, I've heard that name.
And Mr. Jackson and Ms. Gianetti, you're prepared to go forward with Ms. Little's absence with Mr. Nagel?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Why did she have to leave? He must have sent her out to do something.
Watch your step for me.
You solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case now and hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Ryan Nagel, Nagel.
And Mr. Nagel, where do you live?
I live in Canton.
How long have you lived in Canton?
30 years.
And who, if anyone, do you live in Canton with?
I live with my girlfriend now and her son.
And
He went to pick up.
prior to
his
that,
sister.
who, if anyone, did
She
you live with?
said,
My
I'll be
parents,
right
my brother and sister.
And
we
your
need him, why?
brother and a sister.
Correct.
And are you the oldest?
Yes.
And your sister's name is what?
Julie.
Now,
that was water.
and do you work, sir?
Yes, I do.
What do you do for?
I'm a union tin knocker, which is HVAC.
And how long have you been doing it?
About 12 years.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28th into January 29th, 2022. Recall that?
I do.
Do you recall what days of the week they were?
I believe it was a weekend.
And at some point, do you recall going out on that evening?
Yes, I do.
And where did you go, and who, if anyone, did you go out with?
I went to CF McCarthy's to begin the night with two of my friends, well, now my ex-girlfriend and my friend Rick, to meet up with my sister.
And so your girlfriend at the time, and what was her?
Heather Maxon.
And your friend Ricky, what's his last name?
D'Antano.
And you and
They're going to be pulled out
your
too.
girlfriend at the time, Miss Maxon, how long had the two of you been dating?
Probably about a year and a half.
And your friend Ricky, how long had the two of you?
Oh, probably since 6th grade, so pretty long time.
And you went to CF McCarthy's. Is that a establishment you're familiar with?
Yes, sir. It's in the center of town.
Been there plenty of times before.
Yes, sir.
And did you go just sort of the three of you, or did you meet someone else there?
Met my sister there.
And where within the bar did you go?
I believe at a table, to my acknowledgement, what I remember, yeah.
Do you recall sort of what side of the bar you
I was on the,
On.
believe I was on the left side, near the bathrooms.
So
Jeez.
walking in on the left side towards the back.
Correct.
And do you recall about what time it was that you got there?
Jeez, I don't know, probably, I don't even really remember, 7, 8 maybe.
And do you recall how it was that you got there? Like what mode of transport did you take?
Oh, Ricky drove.
And Ricky drove his own vehicle, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
What kind of vehicle did Ricky have?
I believe it was a 2018 F-150 pickup truck.
Recall the color or anything?
Gray, dark gray.
And he picked you up, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And was Miss Maxon with you when he picked you up?
Yes.
Now, as far as C.F. McCarthy's was concerned, you're at a bar, you were drinking, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Do you recall what you were drinking?
Probably beer. It's usually what I drink.
Do you have a particular brand or anything?
Coors Light.
And as far as your girlfriend at the time, Miss Maxon, do you recall what, if anything, she was drinking?
I would probably say beer as well. I'm probably either Bud Light or Mick Ultra.
And your friend Ricky, was
I'd
he
like
drinking?
Mick Ultra.
Yeah, he had a few.
And
Coors
if you know about how long were you at CF McCarthy?
Probably a few hours, probably 2, maybe 3 hours.
Now, following that, where did you go?
From there, we went to, so a friend of mine shot me a text and we went to the Hillside, which is on the other side of town.
Are you familiar with that establishment as well?
Yes, sir.
And when you say it's on the other side of town, about how long is the drive sort of between CF McCarthy's and Hillside?
Probably 10 minutes.
And when you arrive there, how many friends are we talking about that you're meeting up with?
It was just one other gentleman.
And fair to say when you get there, you have some more drinks?
Yes, sir.
Same thing?
Yep.
And if you know, in total, sort of over the course of the evening, as you're going from one place to the other, how many beers?
Oh, probably between, I don't know, 5 to 8, maybe, give or take. I'm not sure.
And is that a large amount or a normal amount? How would you?
I guess for the weekend, it'd probably be like a normal, maybe, I guess.
And you weren't driving that night?
No, sir. No, it was not.
And about how long was it that you were at the Hillside?
I would say I was probably there hour-ish, give or take.
And do you know about what time you left?
Probably around midnight.
And when you left from there, where was it?
I went to pick up my sister Julie because she shot me a text asking for a ride.
And so you were at the Hillside when you received the text from your sister, correct?
Correct, sir.
And did she, what if anything did she indicate as far as where she was or where you were going?
She said she was at her friend Brian's house.
And is that friend Brian, is that someone that you're familiar with?
Yes, sir.
And who do you know that person?
Just my sister's best friend since they were kids.
And I'm sorry, do you know what his last name is?
Oh, Albert.
And his house, had you been there before?
I've driven by it a few times, yes.
Is that somewhere you would pick your sister up from on Pirate?
Yes, sir.
And again, as far as when you leave from the Hillside and you're going to this address, did you know what the address was, or did you have to ask your sister for it? Or
No, I already knew where the house was.
did you know specifically what the address was, or you just knew generally where?
I didn't know the address. I knew the street name, but I didn't know the number.
What did you know the street name?
Fairview.
And as you're, so you exit the Hillside, get in the truck, and who's in the truck at this point?
Ricky is driving. I'm in the passenger seat, and Heather is in the back seat.
And the back seat, as far as Ricky's truck is concerned, can you describe sort of what that is?
It was like a jump seat. It's a crew cab, so it's got like the suicide doors in the back.
And by suicide doors, you mean they sort of open up in like sort of a triangle? Is that?
Yes, sir.
Now, about how long was it after you received the text from your sister to the time that you sort of jump in the truck and start to go over there?
Probably 40 minutes or so. We kind of took our time. She said she wasn't saying come now. She just said, when you get a second, you come pick me up and bring me home.
And if you know about how long a drive is it from the Hillside to there?
5 minutes, 7 minutes, maybe.
And as you're driving along, as far as the address is concerned, is that something that you gave to Ricky as far as the GPS, or were you giving him sort of verbal directions?
Verbal directions.
And do you recall what you sort of said as far as where to go?
Yes, sir.
Oh, where to go?
What was that, sir?
Like the direction we went, you mean? Like the street?
I think we can move beyond that, Mr.
Yeah, really.
What I'm trying to ask, sir, is as you're approaching Fairview, do you recall which side of Fairview or how you approached Fairview?
I was coming down Cedar Crest, so Fairview would be on my left.
And as you're coming down Cedar Crest with Fairview on your left, what, if anything else, did you observe sort of in front of the truck?
I noticed a car coming up the hill towards us.
And can you describe the other car that you saw coming up?
It was a black SUV.
And it was that a black SUV that you were familiar with or anything like that?
No, no.
I didn't get the end of the question,
I'm
please.
sorry.
Sir, if you could just, and I know it's difficult, but if you could just wait till I finish the
Yep,
question.
sorry, sir.
So this can so I'm sorry. So as you were coming up, and you see this black SUV. Did you recognize it as something you had seen before?
No, sir.
And when it's so you're approaching at the same time, is that correct?
Yeah, just about, yes.
And with regard to Fairview being on the left, what, if anything, had Ricky done with respect to the vehicle to signal the left?
He put his left blinker on.
And that other vehicle that was coming in the opposite direction, what, if anything, did you observe as far as their direction?
They had their right directional on.
And so as a result of that, what, if anything, did Ricky?
He flashed his headlights to let the person go because they were going to beat us, obviously, to the turn. So.
And when they were coming in, so they went first, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Ricky's truck then proceeds behind that black SUV onto Fairview.
Yes, sir.
And as you're coming up to the house, to Brian Albert Jr.'s house, where did that black SUV go?
Probably about kind of right in front of the house, I would say.
Came up to the same house that you were going to? Is that
Correct, sir. Yes.
And as far as the vehicles being the black SUV and Ricky's truck, are they facing in the same direction?
Yes, sir.
And which side of the truck that you're in is facing towards the house, Brian's house?
Say that again. Sorry.
Very poorly put question. So with regard to the truck that you're in,
yes.
Passenger or driver
side, the passenger side, or something else that's facing the house?
Oh, passenger side. So my side.
So your side and the passenger side facing the house.
Yes, sir.
And where did Ricky stop the truck in relation to the house?
Right in front of the driveway.
And when you stop in front of the driveway, about how far away from you is the black SUV that you saw?
Probably a car length in front of me, a car length and a half in front of me.
And as you're sitting behind that, what, if anything, was in between the truck, Ricky's truck, and the black SUV in front?
There's nothing, sir.
And at any point in time that you were there in front of the house, did you observe anybody get out of that truck? I mean, get out of the SUV?
No, sir, I did not.
And when you arrived there, what, if any, communication do you have with Julie inside the house in reference to your presence?
I texted her when we were coming down Cedar Crest saying, hey, I'm almost here. Get ready to come out.
And about how long was it between the time that Ricky parks in front of the driveway and the time that your sister comes out?
Probably about 2 minutes.
And do you recall seeing her exit from the house?
Yes, I do.
And how did she sort of exit and how did she come up to the truck?
Like, you mean like what door or?
What door and how did she?
I would say the side door next to the garage.
And how was it that did she come across the lawn, down the driveway? How did she come up?
Guess she crossed through the lawn a little bit, but obviously walked down the driveway because we were at the end of it.
And at this time, when you're in front of the house on Fairview, what was the weather doing at that point?
It just started to snow, sir.
And as far as accumulation on the road or the grass or anything, did you see anything like that?
Very little. Wasn't too much on the ground yet.
And as far as when your sister was walking down from the house to the truck, did you see anything as far as like footprints in the snow or anything like that?
No, I was not really looking for that.
So not anything you know?
No, sir.
So she comes to the truck. How was it that you spoke to her? Did you roll down the window, open the door? How did that?
I opened the door just because I assumed she was going to jump in the back seat. And she goes, oh, would you guys like to come inside? I looked over at Ricky and he goes, maybe we should call it a night. Because obviously we were out for a long time. So she goes, no, I'm gonna stay a little longer. And so she shut the door and I watched her go in the house and that was it.
And from the time that your sister came out and the time that she went back in the house, how long a period of time was it?
Couple
maybe
minutes.
30, 45 seconds tops.
So a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, it was kind of like an in and out thing.
Now, as far as the black SUV in front of you, what, if anything, did you observe about movement of that vehicle at any point?
I noticed that the brake lights, the only reason I noticed is because the brake lights were on and it moved, I would say moved up maybe another car length in front of us from where it was.
And when was that in relation to when you were parked out there waiting for Julie, talking to Julie? When did that?
Probably simultaneously when she came out the door.
So moved up a little bit further, about a car and a half,
Further away from us.
facing the same direction?
Yes, sir.
And was that the only time that you observed the vehicle move up, or did it move up?
No, that was the only time I saw her move.
And when you say the brake lights, what part of the brake lights were you looking at?
The only reason I noticed that it was the brake lights and not the regular parking lights because the third light above was on.
And so above, sort of in the center of the back of the vehicle?
Correct, sir. Yes.
Now, as far as any of the other lights or any other part of the vehicle, what, if any, damage did you observe on the vehicle at that time?
None.
I did not observe. It was dark out.
And as far as when the vehicle moved up from one position to the next position, what, if anything, did you observe in the roadway as far as tire marks in the snow or anything like that?
I didn't really observe any other tracks in the snow besides the car in front of us.
So you did observe tire marks from the car in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, but no other tire marks that you saw?
No, sir.
And as far as around the vehicle, at any point in time, did you observe anybody exit the vehicle or be outside of the vehicle or anything?
No, sir. No, I did not.
And did you see anybody go from the vehicle to the house?
No, sir.
And did you see any footprints in the snow or anything like that around it?
No, mainly because obviously it was late at night and I wasn't really looking for any of that.
Now, as far as your sister, when she comes out to the truck outside, how would you describe, did she seem overly intoxicated to you?
Yeah, it seemed like she had a few. Yeah.
Was she slurring her words or stumbling as she was walking?
No, sir.
Let me ask, from the time that you came down from Cedar Crest, is that right?
Correct, sir. Yes.
So from the time that you came down from Cedar Crest, the black SUV is in front of your vehicle sort of the entire time, correct?
From like the point I turned onto Seacrest, you mean?
Yes.
No, the only time I saw the vehicle was when we probably got up 100 feet from Fairview.
And I'm sorry, it's a poorly put question. What I'm asking is, after you turn from Cedar Crest on the Fairview, that vehicle is in front of you the entire time?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, yes.
And so you watch your sister Julie go back up to the house, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
So to make sure she got inside okay?
Yes,
And did you observe her go inside the house?
I did. Yes.
And after she gets inside the house, what, if anything, did Ricky do with the truck?
He pulled out to go around the SUV in front of us and then to go home.
And as far as pulling out, as far as sort of the distance between the truck that you're in and the SUV that's in front of you, did Ricky put it in reverse and then have to like maneuver around, or could he just sort of pull away from the curb?
He just pulled away.
And as he's going by the dark SUV, what, if anything, did you observe with reference to that?
I observed that there was a person inside the car with the interior light on.
And that would be sort of a dome light, is that right?
Correct, sir. Yes.
Can you see where the dome light was, as far as in the left, right, or center of the vehicle?
I was in the center.
And can you describe the person that you saw? Where were they? First of all, where were they in the car?
They're in the driver's seat.
And can you describe what the person looked like?
It was a woman.
And how do you know that it was a
Had long hair.
And, do you know what color the hair was?
No, I didn't. I wasn't really paying attention to it. I was kind of just watching Julie go in as we were pulling away.
So your direction was to the house as you were watching Julie go in and Ricky's pulling away sort of simultaneously?
Yes, sir.
So that's why you're looking over in that area of the house?
Correct.
And the woman that you see in the driver's seat of the vehicle, could you see her lips moving as if she was talking or anything like that?
No, I didn't. Wasn't really paying attention to that.
And as far as what, if anything, did you observe her to be doing, or how was she seeing?
It seemed like she was looking straight ahead with her hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel.
Now, as far as the other, what if anything else did you see, or who, if anyone else, did you see within the interior of the vehicle at that time?
I only saw one person at the time. Wasn't really looking. It just happened to be like at a glance as we drove by.
You might have
So your
been bent
head's
down
already
getting
turned in
some.
that direction, looking to see your sister get inside the house, correct?
Correct, sir. Yes.
And so as you're going by and you make these observations of this woman in the front seat of the vehicle, what, if any, movement did you do of your body or your head to look into?
I just turned my head as we were driving by to watch Julie go in, and then turn straight, look forward.
So it's not as if you were peeking forward or going back to get a better view inside the vehicle?
No, sir.
So what
Now,
have we learned?
During the time that you were outside of the house,
Oh, there's more
did
than
you hear
that.
any noises or hear anything coming from that vehicle in front of you?
No, sir, I did not.
And as far as within your own vehicle, when Julie comes out, what, if anything, did you or Ricky do with regard to sort of the radio within?
Turn the music down. We had music playing.
You had music playing as you pull up, turn it down when Julie comes out to talk.
Correct, sir. Yes.
And at the time that you're pulling away from the curb, had you or anybody sort of turn the radio back up?
Not that I remember, sir. No.
Now, with reference to when Julie comes out and you open the door so that you can talk to her, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And did you open just the front passenger door or the back door or both?
I opened my passenger door. That was it.
And you were expecting her to essentially get in at that point, is that fair?
Correct, sir. Yes, I was.
Now, when you opened the door to the pickup truck, passenger side door, what, if anything, happened with the dome light inside the truck?
It went on.
Now, after you go past the dark SUV, where did you go from there?
To my house, sir.
And as far as your house, who, if anyone, gets dropped off there in addition to yourself?
Just me and Heather.
And Ricky then leaves from there, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And from that road on Fairview to your house, about how long a ride is that?
5 minutes.
And when you left the roadway on Fairview, the vehicle that you had seen after it initially pulls up an additional car and a half or so, when you left, was it in the same position after its movement that you observed?
Yes.
And this proves what? Exactly.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would just ask to publish a couple of photos for use with this witness.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have.
Is this where you were? Is this where you saw? Is this? Can I go to sleep now?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. May I approach?
Bingo! Why do we have to go through this?
There's a laser pointer.
Okay.
Talk about redundancy.
So, Mr. Nagel, up on the screen, do you recognize what is depicted in that photograph up on the screen?
Yes, I do, sir.
What do you recognize it to be?
Say that again.
What do you recognize it to be?
That it's the Albert's house.
And that a fair and accurate portrayal of what the house looked like at the night that you were there?
No.
In the early morning of the 29th.
Looks like there was more snow than what I came to.
Yeah.
So more snow in this photograph than when you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, with reference to Ricky in the truck, if you could, using that laser pointer, do you see that area of the street in front of the house where Ricky parked the truck?
I do, sir. Right about there.
Okay. And Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next exhibit, number 72.
And there's the mailbox.
Now,
And it was a little further ahead of
the
the
area that you
mailbox.
were describing when you first pull up to the house and the dark SUV is in front of you, do you see that area within this photograph?
Yes, I do, sir.
If you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to where in this photograph you see that. And Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next photograph, next exhibit, excuse me, number 73. Again, what's up on the screen, do you recognize what's in that photograph?
Yes, I do, sir.
And within this photograph, do you see that sort of secondary position where the vehicle moves up and where you see it in that secondary position?
Yes.
And again, if you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to where in the photograph you see. Thanks. And from that side of the yard, is there any sort of landmarks or anything else that you observed sort of in the area where that vehicle pulled up to in that secondary position?
I know there's a flagpole there, and there, I believe it's an electrical box along with bushes.
And it's the flagpole, you observe that in this picture as well?
Yes, sir.
If you could just briefly direct the jury's attention to that as well. Thanks.
Doggy needed to go out. I'm going to start playing tic-tac-toe when he's talking.
Thank you, Ms. Gilman. You can take that.
Wah, 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 wah.
I might have just a moment. Ron.
Yes.
No further questions for this witness.
Okay, cross-examination.
Your Honor.
Please be kind.
Good morning, Mr. Nagel.
Good morning.
A couple of questions for you. Since January 29th, have you been contacted by anybody from either the Albert family or the McCabe family about the circumstances of January 29th, 2022?
No, I have not, sir.
Have you been contacted by any other person other than the Albert family or the McCabe family since January 29th, 2022 about your testimony or your statements?
About my statements, no, but I mean, me and Ricky are best friends, and obviously it's things that we've brought up in the past.
So,
Yes.
I didn't mean to speak over you. So you and Ricky, and how do I pronounce his last name?
Dantano?
Dantano. You and Mr. Dantano have obviously discussed the circumstances of that night
Yes, sir.
and what happened.
Yes.
Did that change your testimony in any way?
No, sir. No, it did not.
You were interviewed by a Massachusetts state trooper on or about February 7th, 2022, correct?
Sounds about right. Yes.
Do you remember which state trooper that was?
Not off the top of my head, no.
His name Michael Proctor, sound right?
No, sir. I don't think so.
You don't believe it was Michael Proctor?
I'm not 100% sure. No, I'm not sure.
Do you remember the state
Is that the
trooper
DUI guy?
had a partner named Yuri Buchanan?
Yes. That sounds familiar. Yes.
That looks like Larry, the DUI guy.
During that interview, you told and I'm just going to call him the trooper, since you don't remember his name, the trooper and Yuri Buchanan, that there were two other people in the car when you approached 34th Fair.
Say that again.
You told those two troopers that there were two other people in the car with you, Ricky D'Antonio.
Yes. In my vehicle. Yes, sir.
Okay. So they were well aware of the identity of Ricky D'Antonio and Heather Maxon.
Dantano.
And Heather Maxon at the time.
Correct.
As early as February 7th, 2022.
Yes.
I want to talk for a second about your approach to Fairview Road. You were coming along Cedar Crest, correct?
Correct.
You would have been going west-ish. I know it's a curved road, sort of west. If Fairview goes north and south,
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
you would have been going west and then turning south onto Fairview, correct?
Correct. Yes.
You indicated that the SUV, the dark SUV, beat your car to the intersection. Is that right?
Correct, sir.
And because the car was ahead of you, Ricky flashed his lights as a courtesy to say, you got the turn.
Correct, sir.
Because both of you were approaching the intersection, but the SUV was closer.
Correct, sir.
You pulled up to Fairview and stopped relatively close to the driveway, as you've indicated to the jurors, correct?
Correct, sir.
And your car was as much as 3 car lengths behind that SUV. Do you recall that?
When we arrived,
Yes.
I would say car length and a half at the time.
Okay. Do you recall being interviewed on or about May 11th, 2023, by individuals not associated with the Commonwealth?
A gentleman came to my door, but I did not speak to him.
Would it refresh your recollection? Do you remember talking in May of 2023 with anybody about this case?
I don't know, 2023 may have been the feds.
Okay.
I'm trying to.
Just listen to my question.
No, I understand.
Were you talked to by anybody? Don't say who. Just tell me if you were talking, yes or no.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Do you think it would refresh your recollection as to when that interview took place if you saw a report?
Yes, sure.
Okay. May I approach you on that?
Yes.
There's a date right up top and then a highlighted portion at the bottom. If you wouldn't mind taking a glance at that and then look up to me when you're finished reviewing that.
Okay.
May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you show Mr. Lally what you showed the reports?
Does he have to?
Does this refresh your recollection, sir, that you indicated in that interview?
Just two parts. Does it refresh your recollection?
Understood. Does that refresh your recollection about what you may have said?
Yes.
So there was an interview in May of 2023,
Yes.
and you did indicate some distance that you were behind the SUV in that interview.
Yes. Well, at the beginning, it was only a car length and a half, and then probably at the end, by the time we left, it was about 3 car lengths.
Okay, fair enough. So at the end, it was as much as 20 to 50 feet ahead of you.
Give or take, yes.
Okay, so 50 feet, obviously further than the length of this courtroom.
Correct.
All right. So at a time when you were in the truck, still stationary, that SUV had pulled ahead of you at least 3 car lengths, correct?
By the end, yes.
Okay. You've already indicated, but I want to make sure I'm clear about this. Did any car pull in between Ricky's truck and the SUV when you were sitting behind the SUV?
No, sir.
You didn't see a Jeep?
No, sir.
With a big old snow plow on the front of it?
No, sir, I did not.
That car was never between your car and the SUV, was it?
I never saw any other vehicle in between us.
All right, fair enough. When you got to the location, you indicated that you had texted your sister that you were arriving. Is that
Correct,
right?
sir, yes.
How long before she came out the door to meet you at the car?
Since I like the text, you mean?
Correct.
2 minutes, because we were coming down Cedar Crest, and I texted saying we're almost there.
And then once you got on Cedar Crest, it's just a few seconds to drive up to the driveway at Fairview, correct?
Yes.
Did she text you back?
I don't remember.
You had your phone out.
Yes.
It was in, I'm guessing it was in your lap or in your hand.
I would assume yes.
Okay. So for a period of time, while you were inside the cab of the truck, as you were pulling up, you were monitoring your phone to determine whether or not she was going to text you back, step out of the house, whatever.
Yes.
Finally, your sister did come out the front door. Is that right?
Correct, sir.
And when she came out the front door, you were looking sort of toward the right.
No, when you say front door, like there's 2 doors to the house.
That's a good point. There's let's call it a front door, which is the classic front door, and then a side door.
Correct, sir, yes.
Which door did she come out?
The side door next to the garage.
Okay, so that would have been close to 90 degrees.
And that's
from
not
where
what she said.
You would have been looking to your right,
Yeah.
not necessarily looking straight ahead.
Correct.
All right, so for that period of time, as you're looking to your right, you see her come out the side door,
Yes, sir.
and you watch her approach down the driveway.
Correct.
So at this point, you don't know what's happening with the truck in front of you in those moments.
No, I wasn't really paying attention to that at the time.
Okay. You indicated that you said on direct examination that you believe that once she was out and at the truck, that she was there for 30 or 40 seconds.
Correct, sir.
Do you remember actually testifying at a previous hearing in May of 2022 that it was more than 5 minutes that she was out by the truck?
It was not 5 minutes. I'm saying the whole time that I was there, probably between 2 to 3.
Do you remember being asked how long, if you know, were you talking with Julie out in front of the house, and you indicating under oath a little over 5 minutes, I would say?
I mean, if you got it, sure. I mean,
Yes.
whatever you guys have.
I'm sorry.
Can you tell
Oh, yeah,
Mr.
do it
Lally what
again.
page it is or something?
May I have that back for 2
Yes, sir.
seconds?
Yep.
just take a look at that highlighted portion and look up when you finish. May I approach?
Yes.
Mr. Nagel, does that refresh your recollection?
Seems that yes.
Okay. And is it, in fact, was it your testimony that back in May of 2022, much closer to the event in question, that you indicated under oath that y'all were actually talking for closer to 5 minutes?
The whole thing, probably, yeah.
Okay. You indicated that you opened up the truck door, is that right?
I opened up my passenger door, correct?
So that does that, F-150, does that automatically open up the suicide door as well?
No, it does not. There's a handle
Okay.
on the inside of the door to open.
So it was just the passenger door that was open?
Correct, sir.
Got it. And your sister Julie would have been standing in the crook of that door, correct?
Yes. So
the door would sort of obstruct something to her right or toward the front of the truck.
Correct. That would be the door.
Right. How tall is the truck? Is it lifted?
It was, yes.
Okay. So that door is
Really
up
high.
above eye level.
It wasn't that high, no.
Okay. You indicated that while she was out there, you turned the music down so you could have a conversation with her.
Correct.
You talked about whether or not she wanted to come in the truck and leave, correct?
Say it again.
You talked about whether or not she wanted to get in the truck and leave.
I asked if she was coming, yes.
You also talked about whether or not you would come in the house and stay.
She asked that, yes.
Okay, so there was a conversation back and forth about either you staying at 34 Fairview or her leaving 34 Fairview and getting in the car.
Correct, sir.
There was also a conversation about whether or not you guys needed to give her a ride then, or if she could get a ride on her own after you guys left, if she wanted to stay.
Correct, sir, yes.
And part of that conversation included even talking about whether or not maybe her mom, your mom, would come get her after you guys left.
I would assume, maybe. 2 years ago.
Right, understood. But it's safe to say that there was a dialogue back and forth during which time you're engaged with your sister to your right. She's engaged with you, looking straight ahead in the crook of the door when it's freezing cold out.
Correct.
All right. And during this time, your attention is focused on your sister, obviously.
Yes.
At some point, she did decide to stay.
Yep.
And at that point, she then left the crook of the door. You would shut the door. I'm guessing you shut the door.
Yes, sir.
And then Ricky figured out, okay, we're gonna get out of here, and she's not coming with us.
Correct.
Did y'all wait long enough to see her go inside the house?
Just gradually pulling away and watched her walk in the house.
Okay. And that answers my next question. When you pulled away, you didn't speed away, correct?
Correct, sir.
Gradually, slowly pulled away and out and around the SUV that was in front of you.
Correct, sir, yes.
So y'all made up the distance at that point after you had this maybe 5-minute conversation with your sister. You made up the distance and got up to the SUV that was in front.
Yes.
All the taillights were intact.
To my acknowledgement, yes.
I mean, as you sit here.
I mean, may I?
Of course.
I mean, I'm not there to, look at a car and be like, oh, is there any damage on a vehicle? It's 12:30 at night. Obviously, I had a few drinks. I'm out looking for that. I just noticed that the brake lights were on. So.
Right. But the point is, as you sat there and you testified about this before, you noticed no damage on any of the taillights.
Not to my acknowledgement, no.
Okay. There's 3 taillights, one to the left, one to the right, and one center top.
Correct, sir.
And you didn't notice or note anything out of the ordinary with regard to the rear of that truck.
No, like I said, it was dark out.
At any point, did you see that SUV in front of you drive up 50 or 60 feet, slam into reverse, and then drive backward?
No.
Okay. At any point, did you see that SUV reverse and hit a pedestrian?
Objection.
Sir.
I'll allow that. You didn't see that, right?
No.
At no point did you see a person laying on the lawn?
No, but I also wasn't looking.
But you didn't see it.
No.
And you did see the truck in front of you.
The SUV, yes.
The SUV in front of you.
Correct.
All right. You didn't see a person standing or lying on the ground anywhere around that SUV, did you?
No.
And it's not just that you didn't see that SUV hit a pedestrian. That did not happen while you were sitting there, did it?
Objection.
You can go ahead and answer that.
No, I did not.
After you drove away, or
Points.
drove up slowly, in order to drive away, you were the passenger, or as you drove away, I should say, you were the passenger closest to the SUV as you would be passing it, correct?
Correct, sir. Yes.
You looked out the right window of that F-150, correct?
Correct.
And you could actually see inside the SUV as it sat there idling, correct?
Correct.
That's because the dome light was on. Isn't that right?
Correct, sir.
And you noticed that the dome light was on inside because you could clearly see what was happening inside the SUV at that time as you passed by.
And I wasn't directly looking inside. I was making sure my sister got in the house okay.
Right, but you did look inside that SUV.
As I passed by, yes.
And you saw one person,
That's all I saw at the time, yes.
female with long hair, is that right?
Correct.
And you did not see anybody else inside that SUV.
No, not to my acknowledgement.
As a matter of fact, you were asked that in prior testimony, and you indicated in response to that basic question, no, she was alone, correct?
Correct, sir.
Yes.
I wonder if the light was on
Thank you,
because
Honor.
when
Okay.
John got out of the SUV, he didn't close.
Just to be clear, sir, she was alone as far as you could see, correct?
Correct, sir. Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
You are all set, Mr. Nagel. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Is that a sigh?
All right, jurors, this seems like a great time to take our morning.
Court, all rise.
Morning break. All right. How long does it take to come back? Well, that was refreshing, actually, because he didn't do any of that dancing. His sister did, but he didn't. Okay. Our next witness will be Heather Maxon. I think that's Ryan Nagel's former girlfriend. They're coming back. Let me go back and.
Thank you. Please be seated. Close back in session.
All right, your next witness, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth called Ms. Heather Maxon to the stand.
Okay.
Excuse me. I don't know why his face is always red.
Raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear the evidence you could give to the jury in the case now in the hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Let it
Good
be
morning, ma'am.
brief.
Morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Heather Maxon, Maxon.
And where do you live, ma'am?
Plainville,
And how long have you lived there?
my whole life.
Do you work, ma'am?
I do.
What do you do for work?
I'm a nanny,
And how long have you been doing that?
about 4 years.
Ma'am, if I could direct your attention to January 28th into January 29th, 2022. Do you recall those dates?
I do.
And do you recall what days of the week?
The weekend, Saturday, Friday, Saturday.
And as far as the evening of the 28th, what, if any, plans or where were you on that?
I was with my boyfriend at the time, Ryan, and we were out in Canton at local bars.
And your boyfriend, Ryan, his last name is Nagel.
Correct.
And did he live in Canton at the time?
Yes.
And do you recall about what time it was that you left to go out to a bar that night?
I don't remember. No, sometime in the afternoon.
And who, if anyone, did you go with in addition to yourself and Mr.
Our other friend, Ricky
So what's Ricky's last name?
D'Antano,
And how do you know Ricky D'Antano?
through Ryan.
He's friends with your boyfriend at the time, Ryan?
Yeah. Yes, correct.
And at that time, sort of end of January 2022, how long had you and Ryan been dating?
I'd say about a year.
And did you know at that time sort of his parents, his siblings, things like that?
I did, yes.
And how many siblings did Ryan?
2.
Brother and a sister?
Correct.
And what's the sister's name?
Julie?
The older or younger than Ryan?
Younger.
Now, at some point you said in the afternoon or so you go out to somewhere in Canton, correct?
Correct.
And do you recall where is it that you went?
We were at C.F. McCarthy's.
Do we have to go through
And
this
how did you
again?
get to, well, prior to going to C.F. McCarthy's, where were you?
At Ryan's in Canton.
And do you recall how you got from Ryan's house to C.F. McCarthy's?
I don't remember, no.
What I'm asking is, do you recall, did you drive, did Ryan drive, and how did you?
To C.F. McCarthy's? I drove.
And do you recall, if you drove, do you recall where you parked?
I don't.
C.F. McCarthy's, is that somewhere that you would?
Do we need to know this?
Yes.
And do you recall, generally speaking, when you came into C.F. McCarthy's, where it was that the three of you went?
Can you rephrase the question?
Where within the establishment do you recall, were you seated at the bar, at a table? Or,
The bar.
And if you know about how long a period of time were you at C.F. McCarthy's?
I don't recall.
And was it just sort of the three of you that were there?
Yes.
And fair to say you went out to a bar and you were drinking?
Correct.
And do you recall what you were drinking?
I don't remember. It was probably a beer of some sort.
And same for Ryan and same for Ricky. Do you recall what they were drinking?
I don't recall, no.
Do we need to know this?
Drinking beer?
Yeah, I'd say so, yes.
So at some point, did you leave C.F. McCarthy's?
Yes.
And do you recall where you went following C.F. McCarthy's?
Hillside Pub?
And is that in Canton as well?
Yes.
And is that somewhere that you had been to before as well?
Yes.
And do you recall how you got from C.F. McCarthy's to the Hillside?
Ricky drove us.
And drove you in what?
His truck.
And do you recall what kind of truck or how big the truck was or color or anything like that?
I don't recall, no. Ford, I believe.
And so Ricky's driving. Where is it that you and Ryan are within sort of the cab area of the truck?
Ryan was sitting in the passenger seat and I was in the back seat.
And the back seat that you were seated in, can you describe that as far as what kind of back seat did the back of Ricky's truck?
Objection.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you.
The back of Ricky's truck where you were seated, is that sort of one long seat or is it cabin chairs or?
One long seat.
Now, you get to the
And
hillside.
that's
you know
important.
about what
Why?
time it was that you arrived at the hillside.
I don't remember.
And had obviously the hillside as a bar as well, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you have more drinks there?
Probably, yeah.
And at any point in time during the course of, do you recall about how long it was that you were at the hillside?
I don't recall, no.
Do you recall about what time it was that you left?
Late.
And during the course of the time that you were at either C.F. McCarthy's or the hillside, as far as, was anybody from your group, as far as yourself, Ryan or Ricky, sort of overly intoxicated in any way that you observed?
No.
When you went to the hillside, was it just the three of you again, or did you meet, or who, if anyone else, did you speak to or meet up with?
We met up with friends, yes.
And
their
a
names?
group of friends?
A group, yep.
And do you know approximately how many people were in the group?
Maybe 2.
So a couple other people.
Correct.
And when you left from the hillside, where did you go?
We went to pick Julie up from her friend's house.
And the friend's house that you were going to, is that someone that you knew?
No.
And is that a house that you had ever been to?
No.
And as far as sort of take Ricky's truck again?
Correct.
And as far as the seating arrangements that you described earlier from C.F. McCarthy to the Hillside, what, if any, difference was there between Hillside and the Friend's house?
There was no difference. We were sitting in the same seats.
And do you recall, or do you know where now, sort of, that you've gone to the location, do you know where that Friend's house was?
Could you rephrase? I'm sorry.
Following, leaving the Hillside, going to the Friend's house, you've never been there before, correct?
Correct.
And having now gone to the Friend's house to pick up Julie, do you know where that Friend's house is?
To this day?
Yes.
No.
Was it still within the town of Canton?
Yes.
You recall anything about the route that you took from the Hillside?
She didn't memorize it, for crying out loud.
No. All I know is that we were taking a left onto the street of the house, where the house is located.
So as you're approaching the street where the house is located, Ricky's taking a left onto the street?
Correct.
And
she said.
what, if anything, do you recall about that time period when Ricky's taking the left onto the street?
Could you rephrase the question?
Ricky's pulling up to the street.
Correct.
Is there a blinker or a directional that he uses prior to pulling onto the street?
I don't recall.
And you're making a left-hand turn, is that correct?
Correct.
And as Ricky is making a left-hand turn, what, if any, other vehicles do you observe in the area at that time?
There was another vehicle in front of us on the same road coming from the opposite direction.
And can you describe that vehicle in any way, as far as size, shape, color, or anything?
Not the color, but it was definitely an SUV.
And as far as prior to either vehicle turning onto the road where his friend lived,
They are
what, if anything,
establishing
did Ricky do with regard to the lights?
that Miss
I'm
Reed
sorry, I can hear you.
and Mr. O'Connor.
As you're pulling onto the street, and the other cars come in the opposite direction,
We're in
what,
the
if
area
anything,
at
did
that
Ricky
time.
do with regard to the lights on the truck that you were in?
The lights on the truck we were in?
Yes.
Well, we let the other car that was coming from the opposite direction, we let them take a right onto the street first. We yielded to them.
And yielded to them as, what, if anything, did Ricky do to signal to that other driver that they could go ahead?
He could have flashed his lights or put his blinker on. I don't recall.
If from this other vehicle, as far as the interior of the vehicle, as you're yielding to this vehicle taking a right, what, if any, observations did you make of people inside that other vehicle?
I've noticed a male and a female in the car.
And where within the vehicle was the male and female that you observed situated or seated in?
The female was driving and the male was in the passenger seat.
And then beyond them being a male or female, what, if any, other sort of observations did you make of what they look like or anything like that?
No, I didn't make any other observations.
Let me ask you this way. Were they African-American, Caucasian?
Caucasian.
older, younger?
Yeah, Caucasian.
So Caucasian female?
Correct.
Caucasian male.
Correct.
And as far as age or anything like that, could you tell anything in regard to that?
Not really, no.
And as far as your sort of differentiation between male versus female, what, if anything, did you observe about them that made you sort of characterize them that way?
Characterize them as a male and a female?
Yes.
Long hair and short hair.
So that vehicle pulls onto the street that you're going onto in front of you, correct?
Correct.
And Ricky then proceeds to make the left-hand turn?
Correct.
Now, as Ricky is driving down the street to wherever this friend's house is, where does that SUV that you observed making the turn, where does that go?
It was parked on the street outside a house.
And so as far as from the time that you're... Sorry, just waiting for the truck to go by.
Thank you.
Thank you both. So with regard to from the time that Ricky yields to that car coming in the opposite direction and the time that you pull up to the house, was that SUV in front of Ricky's truck for the entire time?
Yes.
And where did that vehicle go with relation to the house that you eventually stopped?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Did the SUV that was in front of you go to the same house?
Yes.
And when you get to the house, where was it that Ricky parked the truck in relation to the house?
Right outside the house, probably a little past the mailbox, past the driveway.
And when you make that turn from whatever street that is onto the street where the friend's house is, about how long down the street did you go before Ricky pulled over in the area of that mailbox?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
And when Ricky comes to a stop in the area of that mailbox, or can you describe the distance sort of between where you are in Ricky's truck and where the vehicle is in front of you?
We were parked right behind it, just a couple feet, maybe.
And during the time that you were outside of that friend's house, did that car stay still or move or something?
It just stayed still.
So your memory is that the vehicle was essentially in the same place in front of you the entire time that you were there?
Correct.
And from that sort of vantage point from behind the vehicle, did you observe any sort of damage or anything to the rear of the vehicle as it was in front of you?
I did not.
And at any point in time, did you see anybody exit from that vehicle at any point?
No.
Did you see anybody exit from that vehicle and go toward the house?
No.
Now, as far as when you were pulling up to the house, what was the weather like at that point, if you recall?
It was snowing out.
And what, if anything, do you recall as far as sort of accumulation of that snow at that time?
It was a light snow, but it was sticking to the ground. It started to stick.
And as far as when you're pulling up behind that vehicle, did you observe any sort of marks in the snow from that vehicle?
No.
So no tire tracks or anything that you saw?
Well, tire tracks on the road, obviously, but other than that, no.
Okay. So tire tracks on the road in behind that vehicle.
You are stretching,
Correct.
prosecutor.
And around that vehicle, did you observe? You never observed anybody exit the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
You also didn't observe any sort of footprints or anything like that in the snow around them?
Correct.
Now, following the time that you pull up in that area of the mailbox in front of the house, who, if anyone, came out of the house?
Julie did.
And where did she come when she came out of the house?
She walked right over to Ricky's truck.
And when she comes over to Ricky's truck, who, if anyone, did she speak with in the truck?
She was speaking to all three of us.
And,
Ricky, maybe?
At some point, did she get in the truck and she go home with you or no?
No.
Where did she go after she left?
Back inside the house.
Did you see her sort of physically go back inside the house?
I did.
Is that something that your boyfriend at the time, Ryan, sort of specifically waited for her to get back in the house?
Possibly. I'm not sure.
Now, as far as, if you recall, when Julie came down to the truck and when Julie went back to the house, did she leave footprints in the snow or anything that you could see at that time?
I couldn't see, but I assume.
Nothing specifically.
In other words, she didn't
Nothing
notice.
specific, no.
Jeez.
Now, that time period that Julie was at the side of Ricky's truck talking to all three of you inside, about how long a period of time?
Not long. I'd say 3, maybe 5 minutes.
And in general terms, what was the discussion about?
Just chit chat. She invited us inside the home. And I had told her that I did not want to go inside. I was tired and it was late. Just wanted to get back home. So she was like, okay, went back in and we left.
And when you left, was that vehicle that was parked in front of you, was that in the same position as you initially described when you left?
Yes.
And do you recall, as far as Ricky pulling away from the curb or pulling away from the house to go home, did he have to sort of back out to get around it or no?
I don't recall.
And when you left, was that vehicle basically, as you're pulling away, that vehicle's in the same position, correct?
Correct.
Now, that vehicle that was parked in front of you, was it running or could you tell?
I could tell that it was running, yes. The lights were on.
And which lights were on?
The, headlights, taillights, the inside car lights were also on.
Now, as far as you're pulling away from that house and heading off to home, which way were you facing as you came away from the house?
Could you rephrase?
Let me ask a different question. So when you pull up alongside of the house, which side of Ricky's truck is facing closer to the house? Is it the driver's side, the passenger side, or something?
The passenger side.
And so as the vehicle is pulling away, are you pulling away in the same direction?
Correct.
The passenger side, excuse me, is still facing the house as you're pulling away?
Yes.
And you were looking as, let me ask you this, as far as when Julie left the truck and went back in the house, was she fully inside the house at the time that the truck was pulling away?
Yes.
And so when the truck is pulling away, where are you facing and sort of what are you looking at as you are passing by the house and passing by the SUV?
I was looking out the passenger side window, so facing the house.
And as you go past the SUV, what, if anything, did you observe within the SUV?
I observed the female in the driver's seat.
And appear to be the same female that you observed as you were turning onto the road of Julie's friend's house?
Correct.
And what, if anything, did you observe the female in the, where was she in the vehicle?
The driver's side.
So still in the driver's seat as you had observed earlier?
Correct.
And what, if anything else, could you see as far as the driver, as far as what was she doing or anything like that?
I didn't observe anything else. She was just sitting there.
And as far as you were passing, what, if anything, did you note as far as the sort of interior lighting within the vehicle?
Yes, the interior lighting was on, so that's why I had noticed as we were pulling away the female in the driver's seat.
As far as the male
Because
passenger
John
that
didn't
you
close the
saw
door when
as
he
you were
quickly
on the
left.
street, could you see him at that point?
I did not see any other person, just the female in the driver's seat.
And as you're passing by the vehicle, did you adjust how intently were you looking inside this vehicle?
Well, she's a
Not
boy
very
here,
intently,
you know.
just kind of as we were passing by.
You didn't sort of change your positioning to see better within the vehicle? You didn't lean forward, lean back, or anything like that?
No.
It's called noticing.
And after you left,
Find
that
a
house, where
thread,
did you go
pull
from
it.
Back to Ryan's.
there? Is that where you spent the night?
Correct.
If I may have a moment.
Okay.
Okay. So we've established the SUV was there when she said it was there.
Do you know about what time it was that you got home?
I don't recall.
And that's
By home, I
important.
mean
Why?
Back to Ryan's. No, I don't remember.
Just one moment, Sean.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. I have no further questions for this witness, Sean.
Oh, wow. Microphone.
Mayor, you're right.
Yes.
You can't find it any other time.
Hello, Ms. Maxon.
Hello.
The first time you were ever interviewed about this case by law enforcement was September 1st, 2023. Is that right?
Correct.
So you were not interviewed at or around February 7th when Ryan was interviewed?
No.
February 7th, 2022.
Right.
All right.
No.
So it was a full 19 months after the events in question that you were first contacted by law enforcement.
Correct.
And you gave your statement for the first time at that.
Correct.
The truck that you were in, I can't remember, did you say the name of the truck? Was it a Ford F-150?
Correct.
Okay. That was turning left onto Fairview from Cedar Crest. You recall that?
Correct. Yes.
Do you know the names of the streets, or are you just?
I don't know the names of the streets. No. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the town of Canton.
So okay, that was my next question. If I showed you a map, for instance, that wouldn't really do any good because you don't know the street names.
Yeah, no.
Okay, fair enough. Ricky was driving, Ryan was in the front passenger seat, and you were in the super cab portion of the truck, correct?
Correct.
So you would have been situated directly behind Ryan.
I was in the middle.
In the middle seat.
Correct. So I was
Okay.
in between Ryan and Ricky.
Understood. Did you indicate that at some point you could see pretty clearly into the SUV as it turned, as y'all yielded way and it turned, it would be its right in front of you?
Correct.
And you could clearly see inside the passenger compartment, there was a female driving, is that right?
Correct.
And there was a male sitting next to her.
Yes.
You indicated that by the time you guys negotiated your turn, sped up, made the turn, headed up Fairview, that SUV had already come to a stop.
Correct.
All right. And how far behind that SUV would you estimate Ricky pulled the truck in terms of car lengths? 1 car length, 2 car lengths, right on the bumper?
Yeah, less than 1 car length.
Okay,
I would
I
would say a couple feet.
A couple feet, meaning 2 or 3 feet.
Yes.
So that's your recollection as you sit here.
Correct.
Did you notice anything wrong with the back of the SUV?
I did not.
Okay. You saw brake lights on?
Yeah.
How many brake lights? Left and right?
Correct. Yep.
Was there one in the top center?
I don't recall.
Okay. You certainly did not see a full-sized Jeep Wrangler outfitted with a snowplow between the SUV and Ricky's truck.
I did not.
Sounds like a ridiculous question. You didn't see any other cars. There were no other cars between the two.
Correct.
I forget who's got that. Oh, Higgins.
Is it fair to say that when you pulled up behind the SUV, other than noting that it was there, your attention was not necessarily focused on that SUV?
Correct.
There's nothing extraordinary or out of the ordinary about that car.
Correct.
You were there to pick up somebody, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Or at least potentially.
Right.
So I'm guessing your focus would probably be to the right where the front doors were of that house.
Sure.
And you knew that Ryan had been communicating with his sister, and so you were sort of expectant in terms of watching Julie Nagel possibly come out of the house.
Correct.
So during those moments, you weren't necessarily paying attention to what was happening directly in front of you outside.
Right.
You indicated that you believe that the chit chat that happened with Julie Nagel up at the truck was about 5 minutes.
Give or take.
Okay. At that point, was one of the doors opened?
I don't believe so. I think we rolled our windows down
Okay.
to communicate.
I'm so sorry.
We rolled our windows down to communicate with Julie.
Okay, so you don't recall one of the doors being opened and Julie standing in the crook of the door having this conversation with Ryan?
I don't recall.
Okay. Is that possible?
Sure, possible.
Okay. Your memory is not necessarily focused on that.
Right.
But you do know that there was a communication.
Yes, for sure.
They were talking about whether or not you wanted to go inside the house.
All 3 of us.
Okay. You, Ricky, and Ryan.
Yes.
And y'all were talking about whether or not Julie was going to come with y'all. Is that right?
Correct.
And there was even a discussion about whether or not Julie's mom might pick her up.
I don't recall.
Okay. So the specifics of the conversation you don't necessarily recall, but you do know that y'all talked about 5 minutes.
Give or take, yes.
Okay. During the course of that 5-minute conversation, where was your focus?
On Julie.
Okay. Ultimately, the 3 of you did pull away from the driveway area where you were parked.
Could you rephrase?
Sure. Ultimately, y'all did move. The truck did move past the house and move past the SUV.
Once we left, yes.
As you drove by the SUV, you noticed that the dome light was on.
Could you explain the dome, what that
Dome
means?
light, the interior light.
Yes.
Dome.
Yes.
Yeah. So you could see it lit up the interior of the car.
Correct.
It was a late model SUV, probably a pretty bright light. You could see inside the car.
I could.
You clearly could see, well, you could see a female.
Correct.
By the way, do you recognize the person to my left?
I do, but only because of...
That was a terrible question. Of course you did. Do you recognize her from that night? Is she the person that was in the driver's seat, or do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. But the person you did see was a Caucasian female with long hair.
Correct.
Okay. As you drove by, the interior light was on well enough that you could see her, but you could see the female clearly.
Correct.
And you could also see that there was no male in the truck as well, correct?
I don't know. The other male that I saw in the the SUV before they pulled on to Fairview.
Correct.
He could have been in when it was parked, but the only person I saw as we were pulling away was the female driver.
So when you pulled away, you looked to your right at your passenger window,
Mhm.
correct?
Correct.
The interior dome light was on.
Yes.
And you've testified to this before, correct?
Correct.
You've been asked these questions in another proceeding, correct?
Correct.
And you testified the only person you saw in the interior of that car at that time when y'all pulled away was the female.
Okay.
Is that right?
Sure, if I remember correctly.
Okay, that's all I have.
Mr. Lally?
So, Ms. Maxon, during the time that you were asked about not sort of focusing on the SUV in front of you, fair to say that you would have seen a 6-foot man walking away from that car going towards the house?
Correct.
Okay. You were in a vantage point where you would have seen that had that occurred, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't see that?
I did not.
Okay. Nothing
Well,
further.
he left before you guys
All right,
got there.
So you are all set, Ms. Maxon.
He was a Johnson sort of fella.
Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth to call Ricky D'Antonio.
No, you're wrong.
He's bound to mess it up.
He's bound to mess that up. He did. I think this is the driver of the truck. So we're going to hear the same things to see what he remembers.
Do you solemnly swear the evidence given before the jury in the case now and hearing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you.
I'm waiting for the spelling.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Oh,
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Excuse me. Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Richard D'Antonio, D''A', N-T-U-O-N-O,
And Mr. D'Antonio, where do you live?
in Canton.
And how long have you lived here?
My whole life, 30 years.
And do you work, sir?
I do.
What do you do for work?
I do flooring.
How long have you been doing that?
I'd say 2 years.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to the evening of January 28th into the early morning of January 29th, 2022. Do you recall those days?
Yeah.
And do you recall what days of the week those were?
The weekend,
And do you recall whether or not you worked that day?
I don't.
And at some point in time on that day, did you go out for the evening, leave your house, and go somewhere?
Yes.
And did you drive from your house to wherever you went?
Yes.
And, what kind of car do you have at that time?
A pickup truck.
And
Ford
specifically,
F-150.
What kind of pickup truck?
Ford F-150.
And what color was that?
gray.
Dark gray.
And the interior of your pickup truck, as far as front seat, back seat, can you describe to the jury what that looked like?
There's 2 front seats and a bench seat in the back. It has the suicide doors.
And when you left your house in your F-150, where did you initially go?
I went to a place in Canton called C.F. McCarthy's.
And did you pick up anyone on the way there?
I did not. I met people there.
And C.F. McCarthy's, that's a place that you've been to before, is that correct?
Correct.
Familiar with it on that night?
What table
Where
did you go
park
to?
your truck in relation to C.F. McCarthy's?
And we need to know this
I
why.
wouldn't know that for sure.
Is there a Walgreens lot somewhere around there?
Yeah, right across the street. Normally where we would.
So normally when you went there, that's sort of where you would have parked in relation to the car.
Usually, yeah.
So C.F. McCarthy's is located on Washington Street, is that right?
Yes.
Sort of in the downtown.
Get on with it.
And when you say where we would have parked, so who, if anyone, were you meeting at C.F. McCarthy's on that?
I was meeting Ryan and Heather.
And just to be clear, you're talking about Ryan Nagel and Heather Maxon.
Correct.
And how did you know Ryan Nagel?
I grew up with Ryan, so I've known him for a long time.
And how would you sort of describe the two of your relationship?
Best friends.
And Heather Maxon, how did you know her?
Through Ryan. They were dating.
And do you know about how long they had been dating coming into sort of that time?
And
frame
that's
that-
important. Why?
I don't. Not an exact time.
And so you come into C.F. McCarthy's, and do you recall sort of where within the establishment you went?
Probably sat at the bar, I would assume.
And when you went there that evening, do you recall, did you meet anybody else there, or was it just you, Mr. Nagel, and Ms. Maxon?
I can really only recall us three. I mean, there might have been people there, but we didn't meet up with them. They might have just been there already.
So no one specifically you had plans to meet with while you were there or anything like that?
No,
You know about what time it was that you got to CF McCarthy?
not a definite time, but maybe mid-afternoon.
And as far as you went out to a bar, do you recall sort of what either you, Ryan, or Ms. Maxon had to drink that evening?
Usually just a few beers is all we would drink. Nothing else but that.
And did you have any drinks that evening?
I had a few, yep.
And what was it typically that you drank?
A beer.
Any particular kind of beer?
I would assume Bud Lights, I guess.
Why?
Now,
You want to arrest him for drinking and driving?
Not an exact time again, but a couple hours.
And after that couple hours or so, where did you go?
We went to another place in Canton called Hillside.
And just to be clear, when you say we, you mean yourself, Mr. Nagel, and Ms. Maxon?
Yeah, I drove us three.
Okay. So you drove all three of you in your F-150 pickup?
Yes.
I want to turn this off.
And about how long a ride is that from CF McCarthy's to the Hillside?
I'd say 10.
And just to be clear, 10 minutes, is that right?
Yeah, 10 minutes. Yes.
No, 10
Is that
hours.
also within Canton too?
Yep.
Is that somewhere that you had been before, somewhere that you were familiar with?
Yeah.
And similar to CF McCarthy's, when you arrived there, as far as was there anybody else that you were meeting there, or why did you go to the Hillside?
We met up with our one friend, John.
So adding sort of just another person to the group and going to a different location, is that correct?
Yeah.
Now, as far as over the course of the evening, either at CF McCarthy's or the Hillside, as far as yourself, Mr. Nagel and Ms. Maxon, what, if any, observations did you make as far as level of intoxication? Was anybody overly intoxicated?
No.
And if you know, about how long a time period were you at the Hillside?
I would say a few hours again.
Anything either from CF McCarthy's or the Hillside from that evening that sort of jumps out at you in any particular way?
No.
So relatively regular sort of weekend night out with you and your friends.
Correct.
When you left the Hillside, do you know about what time that was?
Again, not a definite time. Maybe around midnight.
And when you left the Hillside, where was it that you were going?
To pick up Ryan's sister, Julie.
And if you know, how did that sort of come about as far as when did you become aware that that was a destination that you would be going to?
I would say towards the end of the night, I was told that we would be giving her a ride on our way home.
And so you leave the Hillside, you get into your pickup, is that right?
Yep.
And Mr. Nagel and Ms. Maxon are with you?
Correct.
And where were they seated within the pickup when you were driving?
Ryan was in my passenger seat and Heather was in the back.
And do you recall sort of how she was positioned in the back as far as on the passenger side, the middle, or the driver's side?
Not specifically. I vaguely remember her maybe laying down.
And when you're going from the Hillside to pick up Julie Nagel, you knew Julie Nagel at the time, is that right?
Correct.
Did you know the location where you were going to pick her up?
Not the exact location, but the area.
And by area, sort of what was described to you as where to drive?
I believe towards the Kennedy School.
And the Kennedy School, is that an elementary school?
Yeah.
You're familiar with that as growing up in the town of Canton?
Yep.
And so if you could describe to the jury sort of the route that you would have taken going from the Hillside to the Kennedy School or in that general area.
Yeah, I would have taken 138, which is, I believe, Turnpike Street, a right onto Washington Street, and then a right onto Dedham Street, and then a left onto Cedar Crest,
Cedar Crest.
and I believe a left onto Fairview.
I recognize Cedar Crest.
And those last couple of turns that you took as far as the left, was that something that you knew ahead of time, or was someone within the truck directing you how to go?
I knew up until Cedar Crest.
And then who was directing you from there?
I believe Ryan would be.
Now, when you arrive at taking that turn from Cedar Crest onto Fairview, what, if any, other vehicles did you observe in the area at that time?
While driving?
Yes, while driving as you were about to make the turn.
He just hit puberty.
No vehicles that I could recall.
After making that turn onto Fairview, what, if any, vehicles did you observe at that time?
There was a vehicle parked in front of me, in front of the house.
Now,
It was parked, not pulling up,
as far as
already parked.
making that turn, you were using your directional as you're driving along, taking lefts and rights.
I would assume so, yeah.
And do you assume that you turned on your left directional before pulling from Cedar Crest onto Fairview?
Yeah.
And when you, as far as the house that you were going to, when you make that turn from Cedar Crest onto Fairview, how far into the street was the house that you were going to?
Like 20 seconds, maybe. I don't.
What I'm asking is basically, was it the first house as you come in, or did you drive the whole street in order to get to the house? How close to the Cedar Crest was the house?
I think it's a couple houses on the right.
So there's a couple houses on the right-hand side?
Yeah.
Okay. So the right-hand side, from your perspective, would be passenger side or the driver's side, or what?
The passenger side.
And when you get in the area of the house, you park at some point?
Yes.
And where was it in relation to the house that you parked the truck?
Right in front of the driveway.
Now, you mentioned that there was another vehicle that was parked in front of the house as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Where was that vehicle in relation to where you parked?
I would say maybe 10, 20 yards in front of me.
And so from the 10, 20 yards or so in front of you, you could observe that vehicle?
I could.
And from your vantage point where you were seated in your truck behind the vehicle, what, if any, damage or anything did you observe to the vehicle at that time?
None.
And as far as you could tell, was the vehicle running or off or something?
I believe running.
And what about your observations of the vehicle leads you to believe that it was running?
There were either tail lights or brake lights. I'm not sure which ones.
So I'm sorry, if you could just repeat that.
It was either tail lights or brake lights, but I'm not sure which ones they were.
And that was on the back of the vehicle, is that right?
Correct.
And how many sort of brake lights did you observe on the vehicle?
I would assume 2.
The left and right, did you observe anything sort of in the middle of the vehicle? No. And during the time that you were behind this vehicle, at any point in time, did you observe anybody get out of it?
I did not.
And from where you were situated behind the vehicle at this initial sort of point when you pull up about 20 or so yards behind it, could you see any lights on inside of the vehicle?
I could not.
Now, when you arrive at the house and park sort of in the area of the driveway, at some point does Ryan reach out to his sister Julie?
I believe so.
And at some point does Julie come out of the house?
Yes.
And if you know about how long a period of time we're talking about from the time that you pull up and park and the time that Julie comes out of the house?
Very quickly.
And when she comes out of the house, where is it that she comes to?
To my passenger window.
Now, as far as at this time that you had left the hillside and you're driving over to your sister's friend's house, what do you recall about sort of the weather and what was it doing at that point?
I believe it just started to snow.
And as far as the snow was concerned, what, if any, observations did you make as far as accumulation was concerned?
I believe it was starting to stick.
Now, as far as that vehicle that was in front of you, what, if anything, did you observe within the snow on the street that was starting to stick in behind that vehicle?
I didn't observe it.
Did you see any tire marks or anything like that leading up to the back of the vehicle?
Not that I can remember.
Not that you can. Now, when Julie came out of the house. She walked on foot from the house to the truck, correct?
Correct.
And as far as from her path, either to the truck or back from the truck to the house, did you observe any sort of footprints or anything like that she left in the snow while she was walking?
No.
Now, when she comes to the truck, do you recall how it was? There's some conversation, correct?
Correct.
And prior to her coming up to the truck, was there music on, radio on, anything like that?
Maybe while driving there, but I don't believe while we talked.
So that would have been something somebody would have turned down in order to have a conversation with Julie when she comes up to the truck.
Correct.
And when she comes up to the side of the truck, do you remember how it was that you conversed, or anyone in the vehicle conversed with her? Was it through the door, through the window?
Through the open passenger window.
Do you recall whether or not the passenger side door of the truck was opened at any time by Ryan or anybody else?
Nope.
You don't recall, or it wasn't?
I don't believe it was.
Now,
Not what Ryan
you
says.
open the passenger side door. What, if anything, occurs with regard to the lighting with inside the truck?
I believe the interior light would pop on.
And where would that interior light be within relation to sort of the interior? Is that in driver's side, passenger side, center, or something?
I think center roof.
Now,
He gives
the
me a headache.
conversation with Julie about how long did that take place, or how long did that go on?
I would say maybe 2 minutes.
And if you recall, just in general terms, what was sort of the discussion about?
That she no longer was going to take the ride and asked if we wanted to come in.
And did yourself or anybody else from your group express any interest in going in this house?
No.
And as far as you were aware, were there other arrangements that Ms. Nagel, Julie had made for getting home that night?
I wasn't aware of her arrangement of getting home, no.
So she leaves and she goes back to the house, is that right?
Correct.
And when, in relation to when you left, had she already gone back inside the house? Did you see her go in the house?
I did not watch her go back inside.
And when you are leaving from this house on Fairview, again, your passenger side is what's most directly facing the house, is that right?
Correct.
The vehicle that was in front of you, that's facing in the same direction, is that correct?
Correct.
So the passenger side of that vehicle would also be facing towards the house, correct?
Correct.
And when you pulled away from the curb, do you recall whether or not you had to sort of back up in order to pull around it, or not?
I did not have to back up.
Now, while you were, so you just sort of pull away from the curb, is that correct?
Correct.
So when you're behind this vehicle, did the vehicle stay sort of stagnant in the same place, or did it move, or what, if anything, did you observe as far as that vehicle in front of you?
It might be guessing at the time, but I would believe it stayed where it was.
So do you recall anything, so you don't recall anything specific about that vehicle moving?
I do not.
And as far as the vehicle itself, did you observe anything about sort of the occupants of the vehicle or anything like that?
I did not.
Now, as you're pulling away from the vehicle, where was your attention sort of focused as you were pulling away?
I believe my side view mirror and then on the road.
You're looking in your side view mirror to see if there's any other vehicles coming up on your left, correct?
Correct.
And then you're looking at through the windshield because you're driving a car, correct?
Correct.
And at any point in time that you were outside of that residence, at any point, did you observe anybody get up out of that vehicle or exit that vehicle or go toward the house from that vehicle or come from the house toward that vehicle?
I don't believe so.
Just one moment, John.
Okay.
Actually, before, let me just ask you a couple questions. John, with the court's permission, if I could publish just a couple of photographs for this witness.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit number 71. Now, sir, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about the photograph that's up on the screen, but first, what I want to draw your attention to is on the desk in front of you is a laser pointer. Right, yes. If you just press that button and point it in a direction, it'll shine.
Okay.
So with respect to the photograph,
Here we go again.
the one that's up on the screen, do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
34 Fairview.
Is that the house of Julie's friend that you went to potentially go pick her up and eventually she went back to town?
Correct.
And within this particular photograph, you see the area where you had parked your truck during this time that you were talking about in your testimony.
I do.
And if you could, using that laser pointer, just direct the jury's attention to where in the photograph was.
Right in front of the driveway, right there.
Now, also within this photograph, do you see the general area where you observed that SUV in front of you while you were out front?
I would say, if I had to guess, I would say maybe half of the vehicle.
So it's probably a little bit further towards the left of this photograph, correct?
Correct.
Gentlemen, if I could have exhibit number 72. Again, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
I do.
And this is the same house that we were talking about in the last exhibit?
Correct.
So from this photograph, you see the area where you observed the SUV in relation to your truck that evening that you were parked out in front of.
I believe so, yeah.
And again, if you could, sir, using the laser pointer you have before you direct the jury's attention to where about that.
Like right around that, I'd say.
Thanks. Ms. Gilman, you can take that down. Thank you very much. Just one moment, John.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further for this witness.
Thank you.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Make it brief.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So you were driving the vehicle that arrived at 34 Fairview to pick up Ryan Nagel's sister, Julie, correct?
Correct.
And you had met Julie prior to that date, obviously, correct?
Correct.
You had been over the Nagel home several times since the two of you had met years and years ago, correct?
Correct.
This was your best friend's sister, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall about what time it was that you got there?
Not the exact time.
Approximate?
I would say around midnight.
And you now know, as you testify here today, that you were outside the residence in back of a black SUV that was driven by Karen Reed, correct?
I do not know that based off my knowledge.
Not your personal knowledge, but you now know it's pretty much common knowledge, correct?
I guess so.
And in fact, that black SUV was parked directly in front of yours, in front of the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road, correct?
Correct.
And while you were there, you never observed that black SUV strike anyone, correct?
Correct.
You never heard any arguing outside of the residence of 34 Fairview, correct?
Correct.
And possessing that information as you did on January 29th, were you interviewed by any state police investigator regarding this case on January 29th?
On that day?
Right.
No.
What about the next day or the rest of January or any day in February of 2022? Did the state police come to interview you about the information that you had as the driver of that vehicle?
No.
In fact, isn't it true that no investigator from the state police or the district attorney's office interviewed you anytime during the entire year of 2022?
Correct.
And that the first time you spoke to any official, it was not from the district attorney's office and not from the defense in this case, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. You can word this differently, Ms. Giannetti.
Okay. The first time you gave a statement to anyone, it was not Mr. Lally or the state police, and it was not the defense in this case, correct?
Correct.
And that was on May 16th of 2023?
Which time would that be?
First time you gave a statement, sir. May 16th of 2023, does that sound correct?
Around that time it would be.
Okay, and you know today is May 15th of 2024, right?
Yeah,
So just about a year ago was the first time that you gave any statement about your memory of what occurred on January 29th of 2022, correct?
correct.
And you would agree with me that your memory of what occurred on January 29th was the freshest when you got up that day, later that morning, correct?
The next morning after the 29th?
Yes,
Correct.
right. And you'd agree with me that, your memory would have remained fresh for a period of time, correct?
Correct.
And you would agree with me that over time, your memory becomes less fresh, right?
I would agree.
And it's not just you, it's everybody, correct?
Correct.
Objection.
Let's move on from this.
Sure. And you were first asked about your memory.
He's not allowed to go on and on, but the prosecutor is.
About what was clearly over a year after January 29th.
Oh,
I suppose.
favoritism here.
February, March, April, maybe about 16 months after the events that you were asked to describe, right?
Correct.
And then it was only after you talked to someone else, again, not the prosecution or the defense. that
Objection,
you-
Your Honor.
He didn't finish the
Why don't
question.
I see it sidebar, just so we don't keep getting interrupted, Joe?
Oh, geez. Here we go again. These people. Wonder what they're talking about. Okay, he's back.
So I was just going to ask you, the first time that you were approached by the state police regarding this case was September 2nd of 2023, correct?
You don't know.
Around that time. Correct. Yeah.
Right. And that would have been 5 months after the first time you were approached, and it would have been about 21 months after January 29th of 2022?
Correct.
All right. Now, you drove your own Ford F-150 to 34 Fairview, correct?
Correct.
And the plan was to pick up Brian's sister Julie, correct?
Correct.
And the entire time you were in the car, from when you left to go to 34 Fairview until you're now leaving 34 Fairview to go home, that driving arrangement was the same. In other words, you in the driver's seat, Brian in the front passenger seat, and Heather in the back, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall whether Heather was behind the passenger, Ryan, when she was sitting in the back?
I do not recall.
So you don't recall where she was in that back cab?
No.
You do recall that strike that. As you're approaching the residence, you don't have a memory of coming face to face with a black SUV or any other vehicle, correct?
Correct.
You're not saying it didn't happen, you just don't recall that, correct?
Correct.
And in any case, your memory, your best memory is that when you got there, the black SUV, and by the way, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you recall it as a black SUV or?
I do.
Okay. When you got there, your best memory is that the black SUV was already parked outside the residence, correct?
Correct.
And it was facing in the same direction that you were facing as you approached the residence.
Yes.
Which means, and you're from Canton, correct?
Correct.
You came from the Cedar Crest side and you were facing toward the Chapman Street side, correct?
Correct.
Same with the black SUV.
Correct.
And it appeared to be parked properly next to the property, correct?
Mine?
No, the black SUV.
Yeah.
It wasn't parked at some crazy angle, correct?
Correct.
It didn't appear to have struck anything on the side of the road. when it was parked, right?
Correct.
There was nothing unusual about the way it was parked.
No.
And
Making good points.
when it was parked out there and you approached the residence, is it fair to say that there was far less snow on the ground than what we saw in Exhibits 71 and 72 that were shown to you by Mr. Lally on direct examination?
Correct.
Those photographs appeared to have been taken after the snowstorm, correct? At some point?
I would assume. Yeah.
Because there's a decent amount of snow on the ground there, correct?
Correct.
But as you're pulling up to the house, it had only started snowing around that time?
I would say there was a dusting on the lawn. Yeah.
So it was starting to accumulate, but there weren't inches and inches of snow, correct?
Correct.
I knew that.
And your best memory is that the SUV was about 20 yards in front of you?
Give or take. Yeah.
In terms of, but just to get your estimation of what 20 yards is, would it have been farther than where you are now to where the court officer is standing behind the jury box, or is that a good approximation?
To the best of my knowledge, I would say maybe a little further.
A little further.
Maybe.
And there was nothing obstructing your view as you sat in the driver's seat of your Ford F-150 of the back of that black SUV, correct?
Correct.
You did not see, for instance, a Jeep with a snowplow on the front parked in between you.
I did not.
And in fact, you didn't see a Jeep with a snowplow parked anywhere on the property that you recall, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
And you didn't see any other vehicles parked along the property line other than yourself and the black SUV, correct?
Correct.
When you first pulled up, do you recall if, and I know these questions are somewhat unfair because we're talking about 2.5 years later, but when you first pulled up, do you recall whether the red taillights of the black SUV were lit up?
I would say to signal that the car was on, yes. I don't know if they were brake light or just normal tail light.
Gotcha. Okay. And so you're surmising
Fair.
that some lights had to be on because your memory is that car was running.
Correct.
And with regard to the lighting in that area, did you have your headlights on when you were out there?
I believe so. I don't think I would have shut them off.
Right. You would have been driving with your headlights on as you were going down Cedar Crest and taking a left onto Fairview, correct?
Correct.
And your car was still running when you
it's
pulled up
midnight.
to the house and parked, correct?
Correct.
And you would have left it running because your intention was, or your expectation was, that Julie Nagel was going to get in your car, correct?
Correct.
That was the whole reason you were there.
Correct.
And your expectation was that there didn't need to be a tremendously long discussion when Julie came out of the house, right? You expected her to just jump in the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
So that's why you say that there would have been no reason to turn your headlights off, correct?
Correct.
All right. So your headlights being on, they would have been focused really right on the rear of that black SUV that was in front of you, correct?
Yep.
I would assume so, yeah.
Because there was nothing to block your view of the black SUV, right?
Correct.
And you did not notice any broken taillight to that SUV, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, but I did analyze it.
Sure. It didn't stand out to you that to say or to make a mental note, hey, that taillight's broken, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't see any damage at all to the vehicle that you noticed, correct?
To the best of my knowledge.
And with regard to when Julie came out of the house, when you pulled up and parked, sort of perpendicular to the driveway, and that's an accurate way to portray it?
Correct.
You believe that it took Julie how long to come out of the house?
I would guess under a minute.
Under a minute. And then after that under a minute span of time, she then had to walk from the front door of the house, one of the front doors of the house, to your vehicle, correct?
Correct.
And by the way, did you notice that there were two front doors to the house at that time?
At the time, no.
Do you recall if she came out the door that was more in the middle of the house or more over toward the driveway? Do you have a memory of that?
I don't. I would be guessing if I did.
And because the snow had started to stick a little bit, she wasn't running to the vehicle, correct?
I would assume not.
All right, so it took her some time to get out of the house and get to the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
And then there was a conversation about whether she was going to come with you or not, correct?
Correct.
That occurred through one of the passenger windows being open?
Correct.
And who was involved in that conversation?
I can't remember exactly, but I would assume maybe me and Ryan.
There was a back and forth about whether she was going to come or you were going to stay and go inside, correct?
A back and forth. It was more just, did you guys want to come in? No. Not really a back and forth.
Okay, all right. Took a few minutes for her to decide, well, I'm just going to go back inside the house?
If that, a minute or two.
Okay. And from the moment that you parked the vehicle outside that residence, your initial attention, it's fair to say, would have been on the front of the residence to see when Julie was going to come out, correct?
I don't believe I was looking.
Okay. Where were you looking when you were waiting for her? Did you have a phone?
I don't remember exactly, but I had my phone. I could have looked at it.
Okay, you could have been like, as many people do, when you're waiting for somebody, you just take out your phone and start scrolling on something.
Objection.
Do you know if you were doing that, sir?
I can't recall, but I wouldn't rule it out.
You had mentioned
Sirens.
You had mentioned earlier that when I asked you about the damage to the rear of the vehicle, that your attention wasn't just focused on studying that vehicle, correct?
Correct.
And it's fair to say that from the moment that you pulled up to Julie coming out of the house, to Julie walking to the car, to the conversation between you and Ryan and Julie, you were not monitoring what was going on inside or outside that black SUV, correct?
Correct.
And during that span of time, again, while you showed up there waiting for Julie, she comes out eventually, she walks to the car, you talk to her, you were not paying attention to who, if anybody, was inside the black SUV at that time, correct?
Correct.
And you were not paying attention to whether anybody got out of the vehicle during that time, correct?
Correct.
And then ultimately, you were going home. The night was over, correct?
Correct.
And in order to go home, your plan was to keep going up Fairview Road toward Chapman Street, correct?
Correct.
And in order to do that, that would have meant that you passed the black SUV that had been in front of you, correct?
Correct.
And at that time, as you're passing the black SUV, do you recall whether or not there was an interior light on within the cab of that SUV?
I do not.
All right. Were you curious at all who was inside that SUV, given that it pulled up to the same house that you pulled up to?
Not at all.
You were concentrated more on the road.
Correct.
And as far as you were concerned, your night was over, time to go home, correct?
Correct.
All right. But it's fair to say that at no point in time, from the first time you saw that SUV until you're leaving it, did you see anybody in the front passenger seat of the SUV, correct?
I didn't look inside the SUV.
Right. So you didn't see anybody in the front passenger seat.
No, I didn't look.
You also didn't notice at any point anybody standing outside that SUV?
Not to my knowledge.
And you never saw anybody sitting in the snow or in the street or on the lawn outside the SUV?
Not to my knowledge,
And
no.
you never saw anybody lying outside that SUV. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
On me at the moment?
Yes.
No further questions. Thank you, sir.
Anything, Mr.
Thank you.
Lally?
Just briefly. Sir, so from the time that you were in front of the house until you left, you never saw anyone go in or out of that house or in and out of that vehicle, the black SUV in front of you, correct?
Objection.
Correct.
Compound.
Okay. And while you were not monitoring the activity around the SUV, you never saw anyone around the SUV, correct?
Correct.
And fair to say that if a 6-foot man had walked from the SUV to the house, is
Not
that something that
necessarily.
you think you would have seen? Nothing
All
further on.
right. Out of time.
Thank you, guys.
All right, your next witness, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth to call Ms. Allison McCabe.
Okay. And what is she going to tell us?
Just watch your step for me. And remain standing and face the clerk.
Do you solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case down here, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I did.
Nick, C-A-B-E, Colin, Albert's friend.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Allison McCabe, MCCABE.
And where do you live, ma'am?
Canton.
And how long have you lived in Canton?
Basically my whole life except first few months I lived in Stoughton.
And do you work? Do you go to school?
I'm a student.
In college, is that correct?
Yes.
And what year are you in college?
I just finished my sophomore year.
And when living in Canton, who, if anyone, do you live in Canton?
My 2 parents and my 3 sisters.
That was my oops.
So you're one of 4 girls, is that correct?
Correct.
And are you the oldest?
Yes.
And your parents, what are their names?
Matt and Jen.
Ah, isn't Jen the one that tried to get
turn your
Karen
attention
to leave the bar with
January
her?
28th into January 29th of 2022. Do you recall those days?
Yes.
And do you recall what days of the week those were?
Friday and Saturday, I believe.
And so on that Friday evening, starting with there, well, let me ask you this first. At that time, you were a high school student, is that correct?
Correct.
And where did you go to high school?
Canton High School.
All 4 years?
Yes.
And did you play any sports when you were at Canton High School?
Yes.
And what sports did you play?
Soccer, hockey, and lacrosse.
And so January, that would have been which sports season?
Hockey season.
Now, with respect to the hockey, as far as that evening of the 28th, how did your evening start out, or what, if anything, were you doing first that evening?
It started with a team dinner at my house. The hockey team came over. We had dinner. Then I went to my sister's basketball game at the Canton High School. Then I was hanging out with 2 of my friends. We were driving around. Then the night ended with me driving Colin Albert home.
And so let me start sort of back at the beginning before we go all the way through.
Yeah, we
As
got to do
far
all
as,
these steps
the
individually.
team dinner, is that something that was like a weekly thing
Yeah, it was usually like the night before a game.
and sort of rotated between different players' houses?
Correct.
And so where was it on that particular?
That night it was at my house.
She said that already.
Uh,
Pay
what
attention.
time did the team dinner get done, or what time did that wind down and you went to the basketball?
I'm not exactly sure. The basketball games typically start around 6:30, so I assume around then.
And who, if anyone, from your family was involved in the basketball?
My younger sister,
And was she JV, varsity? What was she playing on at that?
varsity.
And who, if anyone else from your family, was at the basketball?
My parents, I'm not sure about my sisters.
And did you go with your parents or separately, or how did you get?
I believe I drove and I arrived later than my parents.
And as far as at that time, did you have your own car?
Yes.
And what kind of car did you
A little Ford Fusion blue.
And
It's
when you
important.
arrived there, you're a high school senior, correct?
Correct.
Do you sit with your parents during the game?
No.
There's sort of like a student section, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you sat there with your friends.
Yes.
And when the game gets over, where was it that you went?
I believe I was just driving around with two of my friends. And then as we were driving, we came across a dog on the side of the street. We knew a snowstorm was coming. So we picked the dog up and then brought it to the police station and then drove the dog back to where its owner's house.
And so just as far as the friends that you were driving around with, what are their names?
Avery Panadosi and Danielle Seaman.
Can you do us a favor and spell those last names for our court
yes.
reporter, please?
Piantedosi.
And the second name.
S. Danielle Seaman, Seaman. Thank you.
Like in the Navy, he's a seaman.
And those were friends of yours from school, from Kent High School as well?
Yes.
And had they been with you at the game previously?
Yes, I believe so.
So you, when you say drove around, whereabouts were you driving?
Through Canton, pretty aimlessly, just driving.
And at some point you come upon a dog, is that correct?
Correct.
And where was that?
On Elm Street.
And this was a dog obviously unfamiliar to you, is that correct?
Yes.
So what did you do with the dog?
The dog ran over to the car when we stopped and picked the dog up, and we didn't really know what to do with it, so we brought it to the police station.
Do you recall at all what kind of dog it was?
No, white.
Dog, small dog?
It was small. It was white and brown. Not sure what type.
And so while you're at the police station, what, if anything, did you learn about that dog that you brought to the police station?
I went in the police station. The dog stayed in the car with one of my friends. And as I was walking in and telling the officer that I found a dog, he got a call from the owner, and she asked if she was like, "Oh, can you return my dog, please?"
And so you brought the dog back to the owner?
Yes.
You know about what time all of that was going on?
I'm not sure.
Now, you mentioned that you had picked up a person by the name of Colin Albert, is that right?
Correct.
And who was Colin Albert to you, or could you describe to the jury sort of your relationship with Colin?
I've known Colin since I've been born. Our families are very close. We went to high school together growing up, in the same friend group. So yeah, we're very close.
So he was in the same grade as you, is that right?
Correct.
So he was a senior at this time as well?
Yes.
And you have mutual friends together?
Yes.
Now, the two of you are not actually sort of blood related, is that correct?
Correct.
But you have sort of relatives in common, is that correct?
Yes.
And to that point, as far as when he reached out to you, let me ask you this. How is it that you came to come by and sort of pick him up on that?
He texted me and was asking for a ride, and then I responded, drove, and got him. Texted him when I arrived.
Now, as far as that sort of, I don't know what exactly to call it, but as far as you picking him up at certain places, like on weekend nights, was that out of the realm of normalcy, or was that something that happened on occasion?
No, that's common. He knew I was driving that night, so it's pretty common. Our friends, we always just drive each other around and stuff.
And without getting too much into it, as far as high school was concerned, particularly when someone was drinking, would they call and ask for a ride?
Correct, yes.
Rather than driving their own car?
Yes.
And as far as you knew, was Colin drinking at least at some point during that?
Yes.
Is that why he needed a ride?
Yes.
And with respect to your parents, did you Around this time that you're driving around and you're going to pick up Colin, did you have any idea where your parents were or what they were doing?
I knew they were going out after the basketball game, but no, I didn't know. I have their Life 360. They have mine, so I wasn't sure though.
And as far as the Life 360 goes, is that something that
What is that?
that you sort of keep track of them, or they keep track of you?
It's more them keeping track of me.
Now, do you know approximately what time it was that you first get sort of a Colin reaches out via text to pick him up?
I believe it was around midnight. I'm not exactly sure exact, but around midnight.
And did you know where he was when he asked you to pick him up?
Yes, the Albert's house, 34 Fairview.
And is that a house that you're familiar with?
Yes.
And what, if any, relationship do you have to the people that live at the Albert's house?
My aunt and uncle and my cousins.
So Brian Albert is your uncle, correct?
Correct.
Paul Albert is your aunt.
Correct.
How is she your aunt? The father's side, your mother's side?
My mother's sister.
And Colin Albert, obviously last name Albert, he's related to people at Fairview as well.
Correct.
So that's sort of on the other side of the family.
Correct.
And do you know what, as far as your conversation with Colin, do you know why he was over at that house that night?
It was little Brian's birthday.
And so he had gone over for that purpose, and you went by to pick him.
Yes.
And do you recall where you were or sort of who you were with when you first get that text or communication from Colin to pick him up?
Yes, I was at another friend's house. After I drove Avery and Danielle home, I went somewhere else.
You drove with the two friends that you were with earlier home, and then you went somewhere else?
Yes, I believe,
And
yes.
Was at that point that you get a text from Colin?
Yes.
Now, do you recall whether or not the information that you had as to where Colin was that night, is that something that came via text as well, or was that a phone call or some other type of communication?
I knew he was there. Could have been a phone call. I'm not sure.
So were there a variety of different ways that you would have communicated with Colin around that time?
Yes, there's other apps as well. Yes.
I'm sorry, you said through apps as well?
Yes.
And what kind of apps were they?
For example, like Snapchat.
So you had each other's sort of Snapchat information, phone number information, call, text, snap, driven, any of those?
Yes.
Now,
Can we get to her picking him up?
when you
And what
that
time was it?
communication from him to come pick him up, about how long a period of time was it from the time that you get the text from Colin to the time that you arrive in the area there?
I'm not sure.
And you're familiar with that home at 34 Fairview, right?
Correct.
Place you've been to.
How many times does she have to say that?
Correct.
And do you recall from where you were coming from, as far as how did you come to Fairview? Would that have been on the Chapman side or the Cedar Crest side, or how did you come?
I don't remember.
And when you get to the home, you obviously park at some point, correct?
Correct.
And where in relation to the house did you park?
I believe in the driveway on the left side. Not entirely sure. I just believe that.
And when you arrive, what, if any, communication did you send to Colin?
I texted him saying here.
And after you texted that to Colin, he comes out of the house, is that correct?
Correct.
And when he comes out of the house, about how long a period of time was it from the time that you texted him here to the time that he comes out to the car?
I'm not sure. A few minutes.
And in the area around the time that you arrive on Fairview Road, what, if anything, do you recall in regard to weather, or what was it doing then?
I believe it was starting to snow. Nothing crazy.
As far as accumulation, what, if anything, did you observe at that time?
Lights
Nothing
on in
crazy.
the house. That's it.
As far as the snow was concerned, was it starting to sort of stick to the ground?
I don't remember.
So you text Colin shortly thereafter he comes out, is that right?
Correct.
You recall, you're familiar, obviously, as I've asked you a couple times now with the house. There are two doors in the front of the house, is that right?
Yes.
Do you know which of the two doors Colin came out of?
No, I'm not sure.
And when he came down, he came over to the car, correct?
Yes.
And you're in the driveway?
Yes.
He gets into what part of the car? front passenger seat?
Yes, I believe.
And from the time that you, so when you leave from there, where is it that you went?
His house and then my house.
You dropped him off at his house and then you went home?
Correct.
Okay,
Now-
Mr. Lally, we're actually going to break here. We have to break a little bit early, but we'll be back at 2. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to sit in your seat and let the jurors go out first, and then Ms. McCabe, you can follow them.
Thank you.
All rise.
Okay, then that's the end of warning. And they will be back at 2, and we will too, or also, but it will be a new thingy. So we'll end this one here, and we'll be back in a few minutes, unless the, speaking of the dog. Oh, she turned around and went back out. Maybe she'll lay down for a while. I hope. Anyway, I forgot my train of thought. We're going to end it here. So far, I like Allison. I don't sense any dancing from her yet. Of course, the defense hasn't started talking to her. But the last 3 witnesses have all said the black SUV was there when she turned down the driveway. Witness said there was a male and female in the car. After it parked in front of the house, they only saw the female, which makes sense because wasn't she there to drop John O'Keefe off? Just because they didn't see him leave the vehicle doesn't mean he didn't leave the vehicle. But that's 3 witnesses who saw the vehicle there at the time that Karen said she was there to drop him off. And I'll tell you what, that prosecutor is driving me nuts. I've got a headache. I'm tense. I'm irritable. Because he goes on and on and on about stuff that he doesn't need to go on and on and on about. Things that have already been established. And he can get to the quick a lot faster, but he's drawing it out to make it look like he's got more than what he's got, in my humble opinion. So let's see how the rest of the afternoon goes. So until then, take care. God bless. Go get a drink and walk around the block or something. And if you're drinking, you should walk. So we'll see you then.